Hey, Wide Awake family. If you see this, it's your sign to smash that like button. Yes, you listening right now. That way YouTube shows you more amazing stories like this one. We love you all. Now enjoy the stories.
I didn't even want to go out that night. It was one of those days where everything already felt slightly off, like the air was thicker than usual, and my phone kept buzzing with junk notifications. I almost canceled, but I had already showered and changed twice and my ride was halfway there in my head, so I told myself to stop being dramatic. It was just dinner. Nothing bad ever really happens at dinner. That thought alone should have tipped me off. We met through a normal app, nothing sketchy, just a few weeks of dumb jokes and late replies. She had this way of typing that made everything sound casual and half bored, which I really liked. She suggested we eat at her place instead of going out, saying she liked cooking and hated loud restaurants. That felt kind of fast, but not crazy. I told my roommate I'd be back late, and that was it. No big expectations. I wasn't even nervous, just curious. Her place was in this older neighborhood with uneven sidewalks and streetlights that flickered like they were tired. The building itself looked normal from the outside, but the hallway smelled like dust and something sweet, like old candles. She opened the door barefoot, smiling like this was all totally normal, like inviting a stranger inside was something she did every week. The apartment was dim, not dark, just low light everywhere. Lamps instead of ceiling lights. Everything beige and brown. It felt the place people used to live in, not really a place someone currently did. Dinner started off fine. She cooked pasta, nothing fancy, and kept moving around the kitchen while I sat at the small table. There was music playing softly from somewhere, but I couldn't see any speakers. She didn't sit right away, just hovered, wiping the counter again and again, even though it was already clean. I remember thinking she seemed distracted, like she was waiting for something else to start. Not the date, something after. We ate and talked, but it didn't feel like a back and forth. It felt like she was letting me talk, just enough to fill space. She asked questions but didn't react much to the answers. Every once in a while, she'd glance at her phone face down on the counter, then look away fast. I told myself she was just nervous or awkward. I've been there. Still, my stomach felt weird, like I had skipped a step in something important. Halfway through eating, she finally sat down across from me. That's when she said it. Not casually, not even dramatically, just like she was checking off a box. She admitted she had been recording the entire date. Not just audio, but video too. Apparently her phone was propped up somewhere in the room, angled just right. She told me it wasn't about me, not really. It was about proving something. About showing her ex that she had moved on, that she could bring someone new into her space and act normal. I didn't even know how to react. My brain lagged behind her words. I looked around the room, suddenly noticing things I had before. The way the lamp near the shelf was tilted. The stack of books with a small gap between them. The framed photo on the wall that seemed slightly crooked, like it was hiding something behind it. I felt exposed in a way I couldn't explain. Not embarrassed. More like trapped in a moment that wasn't mine. Before I could fully process any of that, the door behind me unlocked. I didn't hear knocking, just the click of the lock and the slow push of the door opening. She didn't jump or look surprised. She just sat there, hands folded, watching me watch the door. The guy who walked in didn't look angry at first. He looked focused, like this was exactly what he expected to see. He walked in like he still belonged there, like the apartment was just as much his as hers. My chest felt tight. I stood up without thinking, chair scraping loud against the floor. The room felt smaller now, like the walls had moved closer when he stepped in. He looked at me, then at her, then around the room. His eyes went straight to the spots I had just noticed. The lamp, the shelf, the picture frame. It clicked all at once. This was just a recording. This was staged, rehearsed, planned way before I ever showed up. She finally moved then, standing up and walking over to the shelf. She adjusted the books and I saw it. A second phone, camera lens pointed directly at the table. I felt sick. Not just because I was being recorded, but because I realized I wasn't even the main character in whatever this was. I was a prop. A body to sit in a chair and eat pasta and look normal on camera. The guy started walking around the apartment, slow, like he was inspecting something. He went into the hallway, then the bedroom, then the bathroom. I could hear drawers opening and closing. I wanted to leave. Every part of me was screaming to just walk out, but my legs felt heavy, like if I moved too fast, something worse would happen. She stayed near the table, watching him, not me. I don't think she cared what I thought at all. When he came back, he looked different, tense, annoyed. He grabbed her phone from the counter and checked the screen. I couldn't see what was on it, but I knew it was bad. He shook his head and put it down harder than necessary. The silence was awful. No music anymore, just a hum of something electrical in the walls. Then he looked at me again. Really looked this time. Not like before. Not curious. Not annoyed. Calculating. Like he was trying to decide how much of a problem I was. I realized then that I didn't know either of their last names. Nobody knew where I was. My roommate thought I was just out. My phone was in my pocket, but it felt useless. She finally spoke again, explaining more, but it didn't help. It just made everything worse. She said she needed proof. Not just for him, but for herself. Proof that she could still do this, that she could still pull someone in and make it look real. She said it like it was a skill she was scared of losing. Like I was a practice run. The guy didn't like that. I could tell. He didn't yell or anything. That would have been easier. Instead, he sat down in my chair, the one I had just gotten up from, like he was taking my place on purpose. He picked up my fork and turned it over in his hand. Slow, deliberate. I felt like if I said anything at all, I would make it worse. What scared me most was how calm they both were. This wasn't a fight. This was some twisted closure ritual I had accidentally walked into. I started backing toward the door, trying not to draw attention. She noticed and her face changed, just slightly. Not panic. Annoyance, like I was ruining the shot. I reached the door and turned the handle. It opened. Nobody stopped me. That was somehow worse. I stepped into the hallway and didn't look back. I didn't run. I walked fast but steady, like if I ran they might chase me or laugh or both. The hallway felt longer than before. The smell was stronger now. I hit the stairs and took them two at a time. Outside, the street felt unreal. Too quiet. My phone buzzed in my pocket and I almost dropped it pulling it out. It was a notification from the app. A new message from her already sent. I didn't open it. I didn't want to see anything else from that night. I blocked her, deleted the app, and kept walking until my legs started to shake. I didn't sleep much after that. For weeks, I kept thinking about where those cameras were pointed and how much they caught. About whether that footage still exists somewhere. Sometimes I imagined stumbling across it online one day, read like some weird found footage thing. My face blurred. Maybe not. I don't know. What I do know is that sometimes, when I'm eating dinner alone, I catch myself looking around the room, checking corners and shelves without realizing it. Making sure I'm not sitting in someone else's story again. The first thing that went wrong was how confident I felt saying yes. Not excited, not nervous, just sure, like this was finally going to be one of those normal stories people tell later and laugh about. I remember standing in my room with my phone in my hand, rereading his message about picking me up, and thinking it sounded kind of old-fashioned in a good way. I didn't have a car at the time, and rides always felt awkward, but he insisted in a way that didn't feel pushy. More like he already saw the night as a plan instead of a maybe. That alone should have slowed me down. We had been talking for a little over a week. Nothing deep, nothing dramatic. Just late replies, random thoughts, a few selfies that didn't try too hard. He was older than me by enough that I noticed it, but not enough to care. He talked about his job a lot, always vague, like he didn't want to bore me with details. I assumed office stuff. Everyone says office stuff. We picked a casual restaurant halfway between us, or at least that was the idea. He said he'd swing by around 7. When he pulled up, my phone buzzed right as I stepped outside. I remember the sky was already dark even though it wasn't that late, and the air smelled like rain that never came. His car was clean in a way that felt intentional, like he had spent real time on it. Not messy clean, but empty clean. No trash, no personal things, not even a hoodie on the back seat. It felt less like a car someone used every day and more like a waiting room that moved. The drive started normal enough. He didn't talk too much, didn't blast music, didn't ask weird questions. I relaxed. I even started thinking about what I was going to order, about how I hoped the place wasn't too loud. Then I noticed we weren't going the way I expected. I didn't say anything at first because I figured he knew the area better than I did. I tend to assume people know what they're doing until proven otherwise. That habit has gotten me into trouble before. We passed the turn for the restaurant, then another one. I checked my phone, pretending to read a message that wasn't there, just to glance at the map. We were heading toward downtown, not away from it. My stomach tightened, but I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Traffic patterns, shortcuts, all that. Still, the streets started looking less familiar, more concrete, more empty lots and government buildings with lights that stayed on no matter the time. That's when he finally said something that shifted the whole night. He told me we had to make a quick stop first. He didn't ask if that was okay. He said it like it was already part of the plan and I was just catching up. I asked where, trying to sound casual, but my voice felt thin even to me. He didn't answer right away, just kept driving, hands steady on the wheel. When the building came into view, my brain refused to label it at first. It was lit up too brightly, too evenly. A big square of light in the dark, flags out front barely moving. I didn't need a sign to know what it was, but there was one anyway. Police station, plain as day. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I remember thinking maybe he was a cop. That would explain the confidence, the clean car, the vague job talk. It didn't make me feel better, but it made it make sense. He pulled into the parking lot and parked like he'd done it 100 times. Turned off the engine. That's when he told me the truth, or at least his version of it. He explained that his wife thought he was missing. Not lost, not late, missing. He said she had filed a report earlier that day. He said it like it was an inconvenience, like bad timing, like rain on laundry day. He told me he needed to check in so things didn't escalate. My entire body felt cold. Wife. Not ex. Not separated. Wife. I stared straight ahead, watching people move in and out of the building, their faces tired and bored, and completely unaware that my night had just gone off the rails. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I was even allowed to leave. He did say I could, but nothing about the situation felt optional anymore. We went inside together. The air smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. Everything echoed. Our footsteps, the low voices, the buzzing lights overhead. He walked like he belonged there, nodding at people, signing something at the desk. I stood slightly behind him, suddenly aware of how young I must have looked next to him. How out of place. No one asked who I was. No one asked why I was there. That scared me more than if they had. I sat on one of the hard chairs while he talked to an officer in a low voice. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see his posture change. Less relaxed, more tight around the shoulders. I started replaying every message we had ever sent, looking for clues I missed. Mentions of a wife. Weird gaps in time. Excuses that now sounded rehearsed. I felt stupid, but more than that, I felt used. Like I had been picked not because of who I was, but because I was available and unsuspecting. After a while, he came back and told me it was handled for now. For now was doing a lot of work in that sentence. He said we could still go eat if I wanted. Said it like he was being generous. Like this was still my choice. I didn't answer right away. I looked at the exit instead, at the night outside that suddenly felt very far away. We walked back to the car in silence. I got in because I didn't know how not to, because saying no felt like it would open a whole new set of problems. The drive after that was different. Heavier. He talked more, filling the space with explanations I didn't ask for. About how complicated things were, about misunderstandings, about how people overreact. I stared out the window and watched the city blur past, feeling like I was trapped in someone else's mess. We didn't go to the restaurant. Instead, he pulled over near a strip mall and parked. The lights from the stores flickered, half of them closed, the rest closing soon. He finally stopped talking and looked at me like he was waiting for approval, for forgiveness, for something. I realized then that this wasn't a date to him anymore. It was damage control. I told him I wanted to go home. My voice sounded stronger than I felt. He didn't argue. Didn't apologize either. Just nodded and started the car again. The ride back felt longer than it should have. Every red light felt like a test of my patience. When we finally pulled up to my place, I didn't say goodbye. I just got out and walked inside without looking back. I blocked him before I even reached my door. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped my keys. Once I was inside, I locked everything and sat on the floor, trying to slow my breathing. I kept thinking about his wife. About her waiting somewhere, worried enough to call the police. About how I had unknowingly stepped into the middle of that story. Nothing else happened after that. No messages, no follow-ups, no officers knocking on my door. Life just kept going, which somehow made it worse. Because now I know how easily a normal night can turn into something else entirely without any warning. The night started with that rare kind of confidence that only shows up when you think you finally cracked the code. Nothing wild, just that calm feeling that maybe this time things would be normal. I remember looking at myself in the mirror before leaving and thinking I didn't feel rushed or desperate or overprepared. I felt fine, which should have scared me more than nerves ever do. Every bad day I've had came with warning signs. This one felt smooth, like a lie that knew how to breathe. We had only gone out twice before. Coffee once, then a late walk through a night market with burnt food smells and music bleeding from somewhere down the block. She was easy to be around. Laughed fast, talked faster, always checking her phone but never hiding it. She asked me to meet her friends on the third date, which I took as a good sign. I didn't overthink it. People always say meeting friends is the next step. A green light. Proof you're not a secret. She picked the place. Not a bar, not a house party, but this half-renovated community space near the river that people rented for game nights and pop-up events. I had never been there before, but I trusted her. She said her friends were already inside, that they liked to do things as a group. I showed up early because that's just how I am, and waited outside watching bikes pass and water ripple under weak streetlights. When she arrived, she looked distracted in a way I couldn't place. Not nervous, just busy, like she was juggling something invisible. She didn't linger, just grabbed my arm lightly and guided me inside. The room was bigger than I expected. Folding tables pushed together, mismatched chairs, string lights taped along the walls. There were about 8 people there already, all mid-conversation, all looking a little too alert when we walked in. I noticed it immediately, the pause, that split second where everyone registered me at once. Then they went back to what they were doing, but the energy did settle. It hovered. I felt like I had walked into the wrong classroom on the wrong day. She let go of my arm and moved off to grab drinks from a cooler without introducing me. I stood there smiling at no one in particular, trying to look relaxed. As the night went on, it became clear I wasn't really being included. People talked around me instead of to me. They asked questions, but not the normal kind. Not where I worked or what I liked. More like how I handled stress, how long my last relationship was, what my friends would say about me if they were there. It felt like a survey disguised as casual talk. I laughed it off at first. Told myself they were just protective. Group dynamics can be weird. Then I started noticing patterns. One person would ask something, then glance at another like they were checking the box. Someone else would jot something down on their phone after I answered. Not subtle at all. The whole thing started to feel staged, like I had walked into a scene that had already been planned without me. She stayed nearby but never stepped in. Never redirected. She watched more than she participated. About an hour in, she finally pulled me aside. Not to leave, not to check in, but to tell me something that flipped the entire night upside down. She admitted I was the only person she had gone out with recently. Not in a vague dating app way. In a scheduled, tracked, color-coded way. Apparently I was her 4th date that week. Not overlapping nights, but close enough that her friends got concerned. What I didn't know until that moment was that this gathering wasn't just a hangout. It was an intervention. Not for me, but about me. And the other 3 guys before me, her friends had decided they needed to step in and help her decide who was safe. That word hit harder than anything else. Safe, like I was a potential hazard, like my presence needed approval. They had rules, questions they always asked, red flags they looked for. Apparently one guy had been cut off after showing up late, another because he didn't like dogs, one because he didn't make eye contact enough. She told me this like it was funny, like it was a group project that had gotten out of hand. I stood there nodding, trying to process how casually she was explaining that I was being judged by committee. The worst part was the judgment itself. It was realizing how much effort had gone into it. These people didn't just show up. They had clearly discussed me beforehand. My profile. By messages. Probably screenshots. Maybe even timelines. I suddenly felt very aware of my body, how I stood, where I put my hands, whether my smile looked fake. Every movement felt like it could be misinterpreted. They eventually gathered everyone around the table. Not officially, not announced, but the shift was obvious. Chairs moved. Drinks were set down. I was guided into a seat that happened to be in the center. No one said what was happening, but everyone knew. I was being asked to speak, but I was expected to be seen. The room felt warmer, smaller. The string lights buzzed softly overhead. They went through moments for the night, not out loud, but in glances and whispers. Someone pointed at me when they thought I wasn't looking. Someone else nodded slowly like they were considering a tough call. She sat across from me, biting her lip, not meeting my eyes. I realized she wasn't advocating for me at all. She was waiting for the verdict. My heart was racing, but I couldn't leave. Not yet. Leaving felt like failing a test I never signed up for. I wanted to understand how far this went. How much of my night had been reduced to a checklist. I started replaying everything I had said. Every joke, every pause. Wondering what had been logged and how it was being scored. Eventually, one of them pulled her aside. Then another joined. Then another. I sat there alone at the table, surrounded by empty cups and half-eaten snacks, listening to muffled voices from the corner of the room. I couldn't hear words, but I didn't need to. The tone was enough. Serious, decisive. Like they were choosing a movie or a restaurant, not a person. When she came back, her face told me everything before anything else could. Not relief, not excitement, just resolution. She told me they thought I was fine, but not exciting enough to continue. Not word again. Fine. Like a grade that barely passed. Like I was safe but not worth the risk of commitment. I didn't argue. Didn't ask for clarification. I stood up slowly, grabbed my jacket, and thanked them for the night even though it felt like I had just been evaluated for a job I didn't want. No one stopped me. A few nodded politely. One person smiled like they felt bad but not bad enough to intervene. Outside, the air felt sharp and real. The river moved the same way it had before, completely unaffected by whatever had just happened inside. I walked without direction for a while, letting the noise in my head settle. My phone buzzed once. A message from her saying she hoped I understood. I didn't respond. I didn't block her either. I just let it sit there like proof it had all been real. For a long time after that, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Not literally, but socially. Like every new interaction came with invisible observers, ready to vote. I caught myself adjusting my behavior, wondering how it would score. It took a while to stop doing that. To remember that dating isn't supposed to feel like a panel review. That night didn't end with a dramatic blow-up or a clean exit. It just faded out, like a bad episode you turn off halfway through. But sometimes when I see a group of friends huddled together at a table, whispering and glancing around, I wonder if someone else is sitting where I sat, unaware they're being measured. I knew the night was cursed the moment I agreed to meet at that place. Not because it was sketchy, but because it was too normal. One of those open food hall spots that tries to be everything at once. Bright lights, concrete floors, long shared tables, people everywhere pretending not to listen to each other. I remember thinking it would be safe because it was public, busy, loud. Nothing truly bad ever happens when there are that many witnesses. I was wrong, just not in the way you usually expect. We had matched a few days earlier. He was awkward in a harmless way, the kind that comes across like nerves instead of arrogance. Lots of typing, deleting, typing again. Double text followed by apologies. I didn't mind. It felt real. Like he was performing. He suggested coffee first, then changed it to dinner because he wanted more time. That should have been fine. I wasn't looking for anything intense, just something normal to break the routine. The place was packed when I got there. Lines everywhere, trays clattering, voices overlapping. I spotted him near one of the long tables, sitting stiffly with his hands folded like he was waiting for a job interview. He smiled too fast when he saw me, stood up halfway, then sat back down like he could decide what was correct. I laughed it off and sat across from him, setting my bag down by my feet. For the first part, it was fine. Not amazing, not terrible. He talked about random stuff, jumped between topics, sometimes lost his train of thought, and restarted like his brain had hit a reset button. I noticed he kept shifting in his seat. Not just nervous bouncing, but actual repositioning, like he couldn't get comfortable no matter how he sat. I asked if he was okay, and he nodded too hard, like he was convincing himself. The smells in the place were intense. Fried food, sweet drinks, coffee, cleaning spray. It all mixed together into something heavy. He had barely touched his food. Just poked at it, pushed it around. His face looked shiny, like he was sweating under the lights. I assumed it was anxiety. I get that. Public dates can feel like being on display. He was mid-sentence when it happened. I don't even remember what he was talking about. Something about work, maybe a story that had gone on too long. He suddenly froze, like someone had hit pause. His eyes went wide, not panicked at first, more confused. Then he stood up fast. Too fast. The bench scraped loudly against the floor, and a few people nearby turned to look. There was a smell. Not immediate, but unmistakable. It hit a second later, and there was no denying what it was. My brain refused to process it at first. I just sat there, staring up at him, waiting for an explanation that never came. His face went red, then pale. He laughed once, this short forced sound that didn't match anything else happening. He tried to act normal. That's the part that still messes with me. He stood there like nothing was wrong, like the entire table was suddenly aware of what had just happened. He adjusted his jacket, said something I couldn't even register, and looked around like he expected everyone to play along. But no one did. People were staring openly now, some covering their noses, some whispering, some already pulling out their phones. The smell got worse. It clung to the air, heavy and sour. I realized then that it wasn't just an accident he could walk away from quietly. It was visible. There was a dark stain spreading on the back of his pants. I wanted the ground to open up. I wanted to disappear. I was embarrassed for myself as much as I was overwhelmed by how public it all was. He noticed the phones. I saw a click in his head. Whatever plan he had to play it off collapsed instantly. His eyes darted around, wild now. He took one step back, then another. Then he turned and ran. Not a fast, graceful run, but a desperate sprint, weaving between tables, knocking into chairs, almost slipping. People jumped out of the way, some laughing, some yelling, most just filming. The sound stayed behind even after he was gone. The smell, the stain on the bench, the silence that followed once he disappeared through the exit. It felt like the whole place held its breath. Then the noise rushed back in all at once. Laughter, commentary, phones buzzing. Someone made a joke. Someone else gagged. A worker came over slowly, clearly not paid enough for this. I was still sitting there, frozen. I didn't know what to do with my body. I felt like if I stood up, I would draw more attention, like I was somehow part of it. People were looking at me now, connecting the dots. Some with pity, some with amusement. A girl across the table whispered something to her friend, and they both looked at me, wide-eyed. Eventually, I grabbed my bag and stood up. My legs felt weak, like I had stood up too fast. The bench was ruined. The table, too. I didn't look back at it. I walked toward the exit, weaving through the same path he had taken, except slower, steadier. Phones followed me, too, at least a few. I kept my head down and pushed through the doors into the night. Outside, the air was cool and clean, and it felt unreal how fast the world had moved on. People were laughing on the sidewalk. Music spilled from somewhere nearby. Cars passed like nothing had happened. My phone buzzed in my hand. Notifications already. A video sent in a group chat I wasn't part of, forwarded to me by someone I barely knew. I didn't open it. I didn't need to see it. I sat on a low wall and tried to calm down. My heart was racing like I had just run too. I kept replaying it, the freeze, the stand, the smell, the sprint. It didn't feel like a prank or a setup. It felt like a body betraying someone at the worst possible time. That somehow made it more disturbing. There was no villain, no twist. Just a moment that ruined itself forever in front of an audience. He messaged me later that night. A long paragraph, probably typed and deleted a dozen times. I saw the preview, but didn't open it. I didn't block him either. I just let it sit there, unread. I didn't know what to say, and I knew anything I said would be wrong. The place shut down that table for the rest of the night. I found out later from a post that went around. People joked about it, turned it into content, slowed down the video, added captions. By the next day, it had already become one of those stories people tell like a legend. Everyone remembered it differently. No one mentioned me by name, but I knew I was there, just off frame, part of it forever. I haven't been back to that food hall since, not because of fear, but because I know exactly where it happened. I know which table. I know how many people were watching. Sometimes I wonder where he ran to, if he made it home. If he ever goes out in public again, I don't feel angry, just unsettled, like I saw something too human in the worst way. I should have known something was wrong when the night felt too easy. Not exciting, easy, but smooth in a way that didn't leave room for doubt. Those are the nights that sneak up on you later. The kind you replay because nothing obvious warned you. I remember walking toward the place we picked and feeling weirdly calm, like my brain had decided to clock out early. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't hyped. I was just there, moving through the evening like it had already been approved by someone else. We met online the boring, normal way and talked for a bit longer than I usually do before meeting someone. She was consistent. Replies on time, details that lined up, stories that didn't contradict themselves. She said she was single without hesitation. Not newly, not complicated, just single. I didn't push for more because I didn't feel the need to. Sometimes things really are that simple. The place was this mid-range restaurant wedged between a closed bookstore and a nail salon that stayed open late. Warm lighting, low music, nothing fancy. The kind of place where people go on anniversaries or double dates or to pretend they're celebrating something even if they're not. Inside smelled like bread and oil and something sweet I couldn't place. It felt intimate without being quiet, which I liked. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table scrolling on her phone. She smiled when she saw me and put it face down immediately, like she didn't want it to interrupt. I noticed that, but only as a positive thing. I sat down, ordered a drink, and everything flowed the way first dates are supposed to. Jokes landed. Pauses felt natural. We leaned in when we talked, not because we had to, but because the music made it easier. She talked about her work, her friends, places she wanted to go. Nothing too personal, nothing guarded either. I didn't feel like I was pulling information out of her. She didn't ask invasive questions, just enough to show interest. I remember thinking this might actually turn into something beyond one night, not in a dramatic way, just a quiet possibility. Time passed faster than I expected. Plates came and went. Drinks were refilled. The restaurant got louder as more people came in. I started noticing little things, though. Her checking the time more often, adjusting her seat, glancing at the door like she was waiting for someone, then looking away quickly when no one walked in. I told myself she might just be tired or anxious. First dates do that. Halfway through dessert, it happened. Her phone lit up on the table. She had forgotten to silence it. The vibration was loud against the wood, sharp enough to cut through the noise around us. Before she could grab it, the call went through on speaker. Not because she meant to answer it, but because her screen was already unlocked and her hand hit the wrong spot in a panic. The voice filled the space between us. Clear, close, unmistakably familiar to her. It wasn't a friend checking in. It wasn't a coworker. It was someone who knew exactly where she was supposed to be and why she was there. He was asking why she was late. Not just late, but late for something that had been planned and marked and remembered. Their anniversary dinner. The world did stop, but it shifted. I felt it in my chest, like gravity had adjusted slightly and my body needed a second to catch up. She froze. Completely. Phone still in her hand, eyes wide, face training of color. People at nearby tables glanced over, curious, then quickly looked away like they didn't want to be part of it. She fumbled to turn the phone off, but the damage was already done. I didn't need more details. Anniversary, fiancé. Those words don't need context. They don't leave room for interpretation. Everything she had told me rearranged itself in my head, slots clicking into place in a way I didn't want. The silence after was worse than the call. She didn't look at me right away, just stared at the table like it might give her instructions. I didn't say anything either. I didn't know how. My mouth felt dry, like all the air had been sucked out of the room and replaced with something heavy. She finally started moving, putting the phone face down again, hands shaking slightly. I could see the thoughts racing behind her eyes, excuses lining up, explanations forming, but none of it came out. Maybe she realized there was nothing she could say that would make this better. Maybe she was still hoping I had misunderstood, even though that wasn't possible. I looked around the restaurant, suddenly hyper-aware of where we were. Couples leaning close, laughing. A cake being brought out to another table with candles flickering. Someone clapping softly. It all felt cruelly ironic. I wondered if he was sitting somewhere similar, waiting, checking his phone, wondering what he had done wrong to be forgotten on a night like that. She tried to act like we could move past it, like this was just an awkward interruption. She reached for her fork, then stopped. She couldn't keep pretending. Neither could I. The version of her I had been talking to for the past hour dissolved right there, replaced by someone I didn't know and didn't want to. My thoughts spiraled fast. How long had this been going on? How many other nights like this? How easy it had been for her to sit across from me and smile while someone else was expecting her somewhere else. It wasn't even the betrayal that hit hardest. It was the ease of it, the calm, the practice. I stood up slowly. My legs felt stiff, like they had been locked in place too long. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. I didn't need to. The situation had already done that on its own. I grabbed my jacket and placed some cash on the table for my share. Not because I owed her anything, but because I wanted to leave cleanly. No loose ends. She looked up at me then, eyes wide, mouth opening like she wanted to say something. Maybe an apology. Maybe a lie. Maybe the truth, finally. I didn't wait to find out. I turned and walked out, heart pounding, ears ringing, the sound of the restaurant fading behind me. Outside, the night air felt sharp and grounding. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly, trying to steady myself. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Messages from her, one after another. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. Whatever she wanted to say could change what had already happened. I walked for a while without direction, letting the city carry me. Lights blurred, cars passed. People laughed as they crossed the street. Life went on, completely unaware that my night had just cracked open in the most uncomfortable way. Later, when I finally sat down somewhere quiet, I thought about the phone ringing, about how close she had been to pulling it off. If she had silenced it properly, if he had waited 10 more minutes, I might have never known. I would have gone home thinking I had met someone genuine. That thought bothered me more than anything else. I didn't feel angry. I felt unsettled. Like I had brushed up against a reality I wasn't supposed to see. How easily stories overlap. How often people step into someone else's life without realizing it until it's too late. I haven't heard from her since that night. Maybe she fixed things. Maybe she did. I don't really care. All I know is that every time my phone rings during dinner now, I notice it. Every time someone says they're single without hesitation, I pause for half a second longer than I used to. That night didn't explode. It didn't end with shouting or tears. It just stopped, clean and sudden like a cord being cut. And sometimes that's the part that sticks with you the most. I noticed his phone before I noticed him. That's how the night started, which already says a lot. It was lighting up on the table every few minutes like it had its own heartbeat, buzzing softly, screen flashing, then going dark again. I remember sitting there watching it instead of his face, like my brain knew something wasn't right but didn't have proof yet. I should have trusted that feeling. I always think that after. We met outside this little taco place we had both agreed on because it was cheap and open late. Nothing fancy. Plastic chairs, chip tables. Music that was always too loud. The kind of place people go when they don't want pressure. He was already there when I arrived, standing near the window, phone in hand, typing fast. He smiled when he saw me but didn't put the phone away right away. Just flipped it face down like it was something he had to keep close. At first, I brushed it off. Everyone checks their phone too much. I do it too sometimes. I didn't want to be the person who reads into everything. We ordered food, sat down, started talking. He was charming in a way that felt practiced but not fake, like he'd done this enough times to know what worked. Jokes landed, stories flowed, eye contact came and then went. But the phone kept coming back. Every few minutes, he'd glance down, sometimes unlocking it under the table, sometimes lifting it just enough to see the screen. Had apologized with his eyes without actually saying anything, then jumped back into the conversation like nothing happened. I noticed he never left it unattended. Not when he went to grab napkins. Not when he shifted his chair. It stayed with him like a second limb. I tried to focus on what he was saying, but my attention kept drifting. I started tracking patterns instead. How he checked the time after each buzz. How he'd angled his body slightly away when he typed. How he'd pause mid-thought sometimes, like he was waiting for something to resolve somewhere else before continuing. It felt less like nerves and more like coordination. The place across the street was another casual spot, almost identical but with burgers instead of tacos. Big front windows, outdoor seating, string lights. I could see it clearly from where we sat. People moving inside, laughing, leaning over tables. At one point, while he was distracted by his phone again, I caught sight of someone over there who looked familiar. It took a second for my brain to place it. Then it hit me. I recognized her from his profile photos. My stomach dropped, slow and heavy. I didn't want to be right. I stared longer than I should have, heart pounding, watching as she laughed and leaned forward, mirroring movements I had seen him do with me just minutes earlier. She was sitting across from someone I couldn't see clearly yet. Then he shifted in his seat, blocking my view, and his phone buzzed again. He excused himself to use the restroom. That's when I really started paying attention. I watched him stand up, walk past our table. Then instead of turning toward the back where the bathrooms were, he angled toward the exit. He paused there, glanced back at me, then pushed the door open and stepped outside. I waited, counted in my head. 1 minute. 2. I pretended to check my phone, but really I was watching the reflection in the window. I saw him cross the street. Saw him slip into the burger place. Saw him lean over a table that wasn't mine. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air without standing up. Everything clicked all at once. The phone, the timing, the pauses. He went distracted. He was split, running 2 nights in parallel, bouncing back and forth like a messed up experiment. Whichever one went better would win. The other would get a polite ending, maybe an excuse about not feeling a spark. I felt stupid sitting there alone with my tray of half-eaten food. People around me kept talking, laughing, living their normal lives while mine cracked open quietly. No dramatic confrontation. No raised voices. Just me watching my date through glass across the street, realizing I was part of some ranking system I didn't agree to join. He came back a few minutes later, breath slightly off, smile reset. Sat down like nothing had happened. He picked up where we left off, telling a story that suddenly sounded hollow. I nodded along, but my brain was elsewhere. I was replaying what I had just seen, making sure I wasn't imagining it. But I knew I was. The rest of the night felt unreal, like I was acting in a scene I no longer cared about. I answered questions automatically, laughed at the right moments, watched his phone buzz again and again. Every time it did, I imagined her across the street, waiting, wondering where he was. Maybe she thought he was grabbing a drink. Maybe she had already noticed something off too. At one point, he suggested getting dessert, said we could walk somewhere nearby. I looked past him at the burger place, where I could still see her silhouette through the window. She was checking her phone now, face lit up by the screen. Maybe she was getting the same messages I was. Maybe he was juggling both of us in real time, adjusting tone and timing like a game. I told him I wasn't feeling great and wanted to head home. My voice sounded calm, which surprised me. I expected anger or sadness or something louder. Instead, I felt tired, drained in a way that went deeper than one bad date. He looked disappointed, but not shocked, like this was an outcome he had already calculated. He offered to walk me part of the way. I said no. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and walked out before he could insist. Outside, the night air felt cooler, heavier. I crossed the street, deliberately passing right in front of the burger place. I didn't look inside again. I didn't need to. As I walked away, my phone buzzed. A message from him, probably asking if I got home safe or suggesting another time. I didn't open it. I didn't block him either. I just let it sit there unread like a loose end I refused to tie up for him. Later that night, curiosity got the better of me. I checked his profile again. Noticed little things I had missed before. Vague availability. Flexible plans. Jokes about multitasking that didn't seem like jokes anymore. I wondered how many times had done this. How many people had sat at different tables, thinking they were being chosen, not compared. What stuck with me was the betrayal. It was the efficiency. The way he had optimized human connection like a schedule. Like feelings were variables to test, not things that mattered on their own. It made everything feel colder than it needed to be. I haven't run into him since. I don't know which one of us he picked that night, or if he picked either at all. Maybe neither scored high enough. Maybe he's still out there, bouncing between tables, phones lighting up, nights overlapping. Sometimes when I'm out now and someone checks their phone too often, I feel my chest tighten just a little. Not enough to panic. Just enough to remember that night. The glow of screens. The glass between us. The quiet realization that I was never the only option, just one of them. I didn't trust him right away, which is funny because I trusted him enough to show up. There's a difference, I guess. I remember standing at the bus stop on the way there, watching my reflection wobble in the glass of the shelter, thinking how this one felt different, but not in a scary way. More like polished, like someone who had their life lined up clean and straight, no loose threads hanging out. That should have been the warning, but I didn't know that yet. We met online like everyone else does. His profile was calm and boring in a reassuring way. No wild claims, no thirst traps, just pictures that looked like they were taken by coworkers at after-work things. Button-downs, neutral smiles, background blur from office buildings. When I asked what he did, he said finance, simple and confident. Not flashy. I didn't push him to explain. I didn't care enough to. Sometimes boring is exactly what you want. He picked the place. A wine bar downtown with soft lighting and stools that were uncomfortable on purpose. The kind of place that makes you feel like you're supposed to stay alert. Everything was wood and glass and muted colors. I got there first and sat at the bar, checking my phone too much, pretending I wasn't watching the door. He walked in right on time. Not early, not late, wearing a jacket that probably cost more than my rent, but didn't look like it was trying to prove anything. Clean shoes, neat hair, no fidgeting. When he sat down next to me, it felt like sitting next to someone who knew where they were supposed to be at all times. I liked that feeling. It made me feel steadier just by proximity. The first half of the date was easy. He talked about work without going into details, just enough to sound busy and important without being annoying. I talked about my job and my schedule, the usual safe topics. He listened well, really well. Didn't interrupt, didn't zone out. When he laughed, it felt natural, not rehearsed. I remember thinking this was the kind of person my friends would approve of without grilling me afterward. I noticed the little things that felt off, but not enough to matter. How he avoided specifics when I asked about his company. How he kept his phone face down and slightly tucked under his leg. How he scanned the room more than necessary, eyes moving from door to window to mirror behind the bar. I told myself it was a habit. Some people are just observant. We ordered another round. The place filled up as the night went on, voices overlapping, glasses clinking. Everything felt normal, comfortable. I started relaxing into the stool, leaning my elbow on the bar, forgetting to check my phone. That's when the shift happened. I didn't notice the police at first. Not until the room quieted just a little, like when a song changes and everyone pauses without realizing why. Then I saw them in the mirror behind the bar. 2 officers standing near the entrance, scanning the room. My stomach tightened for no reason at all. I wasn't doing anything wrong. Neither was he. At least I thought so. They walked over slowly, not rushed, not aggressive. Just deliberate. People around us tried not to stare and failed. I felt my heart start to race, the way it does when something unexpected brushes too close. They stopped right behind us. I turned slightly confused, waiting for them to ask someone else for directions or something equally boring. They asked for him by name. The sound of his name in that space felt wrong, like it did belong there. He stiffened instantly. Not surprised, not confused. Resigned. I saw it in his shoulders, the way they dropped just a little, like he had been holding them up all night and finally let go. Everything after that blurred together in a way that's hard to describe. They asked him to stand. He did. They asked for his hands. He gave them. The metal clicked softly, almost politely. No yelling. No scene. Just procedure unfolding in a room that wasn't meant for it. I sat there frozen, my drink untouched, watching the man I had been laughing with minutes earlier get restrained like he had always known this moment was coming. People stared openly now. Phones came out. The bartender stopped wiping the counter and just watched. One of the officers turned to me then. His face was neutral, tired, like this wasn't even the strangest thing he had dealt with that night. He asked me how long I had known him. Not if I knew him. How long? My brain lagged. The question landed heavier than anything else. Suddenly, I wasn't just a bystander. I was connected by proximity, by timing, by coincidence. I told him the truth. That we had met online. That this was our first date. That I had known him less than an hour. My voice sounded far away even to me. They asked for my id. Asked if I had any involvement in his work. Asked if I knew what he really did. Each question chipped away at the version of the night I thought I was having. I felt exposed, like my normal life had been cracked open and inspected under harsh light. He didn't look at me. Not once. Not when they asked questions. Not when they read him his rights. Not when they guided him toward the door. It was like I had already been erased from his mental list of problems. Or maybe he never saw me as real to begin with. Someone paid his tab. I don't know who. Maybe the bar just wanted it done. I stood up slowly, legs shaky, and moved away from the counter. One of the officers told me I was free to go. Free felt like a strange word in that moment, like it didn't apply to how I felt at all. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. I stood on the sidewalk watching them load him into the back of a car that looked exactly like every other one on the street until it didn't. The door closed. The engine started. He was gone. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I felt hollowed out, like someone had reached into my chest and scooped something out without asking. I walked for a while without direction, replaying everything. His calm, his confidence, the way he had talked about finance like it was just a job, not a cover. Later, curiosity got the better of me. I looked him up. It didn't take long. News articles, court filings, warnings buried in forums. Fraud on a scale I couldn't wrap my head around. Years of lies stacked neatly on top of each other. I read until my eyes hurt. Each detail made the night feel more unreal, like I had brushed up against a story that wasn't meant to touch mine. What stuck with me most was that he lied. It was how normal he was while doing it. How easy it was for him to sit there and smile and talk about nothing while carrying all of that underneath. It made me question how much you can ever really know someone from a table and a drink and an hour of polite conversation. No one followed up with me. No calls. No emails. I was important enough to the case. I was just a footnote in a bad night. That should have been comforting, but it wasn't. It just made everything feel disposable. Now, whenever someone tells me what they do, I listen differently. Not suspicious, just aware. Aware that some people are very good at building versions of themselves that fit perfectly into a setting. Or that sometimes the scariest moments aren't loud or violent or obvious. Sometimes they sit right next to you, order the same drink, and wait calmly for the inevitable. I knew something felt off before I even knocked, but I ignored it because that's what I always do. I tell myself not to overthink, not to ruin a decent night by letting my brain sprint ahead of reality. The street was quiet in that stretched out way neighborhoods get after dinner, where the air feels paused and every parked car looks like it's watching you. I remember standing there with my phone in my hand, rereading her address like it might change if I lived long enough. We had been talking for a couple weeks, nothing intense, just enough to build momentum. She was funny in a dry way and didn't over-explain things, which I liked. She invited me over instead of meeting out, said she was tired of loud places and wanted to stay in. I hesitated for a second, then agreed. It felt normal enough. People do that all the time. I wasn't expecting anything big, just a chill night and maybe a movie. When she opened the door, everything seemed fine. Too fine, actually. She was relaxed, smiling, already in socks like I had walked into a place she was comfortable in. The apartment smelled like laundry soap and something cooked earlier. It felt live-in. Not messy, but not staged either. Shoes by the door that didn't all look the same. A jacket on the back of a chair that wasn't hers. I noticed these things but didn't connect them yet. We sat on the couch, talked, scrolled through streaming options without picking anything. That awkward but familiar dance. She got up to grab drinks, and that's when she casually mentioned it. Not like a warning, not like a confession. Just a throwaway detail slipped into the air. She said her ex still lived there for now, like it was about a plant or a piece of furniture, like it didn't matter. My stomach dropped, but I didn't react the way I should have. I didn't stand up. I didn't leave. I asked a couple neutral questions in my head and then swallowed them. She explained quickly that they were broken up, just stuck in the same place until the lease ended. Said they stayed out of each other's way. Said it was a big deal. She said it like she had practiced saying it until it sounded harmless. I told myself it wasn't my business. Told myself people have complicated situations. I didn't want to be dramatic, so I stayed. That decision felt small at the time, like choosing a different snack. It didn't feel like the kind of choice that would spiral. About 20 minutes later, I heard keys. At first, I thought it was the neighbors. Whole buildings have sounds that travel weird. Then the door unlocked. Not slowly, not cautiously. Like someone who belonged there and didn't expect surprises. She stiffened next to me just slightly. Not panic, more annoyance. Like something had interrupted her plan. He walked in and everything changed at once. The air shifted. My body reacted before my brain did. I stood up without realizing it. He stopped short when he saw me, eyes narrowing, jaw tightening. He didn't look confused. He looked certain, like he had already decided what I was. She tried to smooth it over, immediately moving toward him, hands out, talking fast. I couldn't hear everything because my heart was pounding too loud. I caught fragments, explanations, timing. Words that didn't matter anymore. He wasn't listening. His eyes stayed on me, scanning, measuring. I felt like I was being lined up with a story I hadn't been given. The accusation landed without words. It was written all over his face. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't a date. I was proof. Proof of something he had already suspected or feared. I tried to speak, to clarify, but everything felt wrong. Any sound I made felt like it would confirm his version instead of mine. He pulled his phone out and started recording. Not subtle, not hidden. Pointed straight at me. I remember the little red dot glowing on the screen and feeling my chest tighten. She told him to stop. He didn't. He backed away slightly, still filming, then turned and walked into the hallway. I stood there frozen, not knowing whether to follow or leave or wait. She looked at me like she wanted me to stay calm, like this was something she could still manage. Then I heard him on the phone. Not to a friend, not to family, to the cops. He reported it like a fact, like there was no room for doubt. Said he came home and found someone with his partner. Said he felt unsafe. Said he didn't know what else to do. Every word felt like it erased me a little more. I was a person in his story. I was a role. I finally grabbed my jacket and moved toward the door. She followed me, whispering urgently, telling me to wait, telling me it would be fine, telling me not to leave because it would look bad. That sentence stuck with me. Not because it was wrong, but because it showed exactly where I ranked in the situation. Before I could decide, there was a knock. Heavy, official, the kind of knock that doesn't ask permission. The cops were there faster than I expected. The apartment suddenly felt too small, like all the walls had moved closer. They stepped inside and everything slowed down. Questions started flying, but not at me first. He spoke fast, confident, still holding his phone like evidence. She tried to interrupt, to explain the arrangement, the breakup, the living situation. The words overlapped and tangled. It sounded like noise. Then they turned to me. Standing there, trying to explain myself without sounding defensive felt impossible. Every sentence felt like it needed 10 footnotes. I told him I was invited. Told him I didn't know he still lived there until after I arrived. Told him I was just there for a date. Saying it out loud made it sound ridiculous. They asked for my id. Asked how long I had known her. Asked if I had been there before. Every answer felt like it pushed me deeper into something I never agreed to be part of. He watched the whole thing with his arms crossed, expression unreadable. Not angry anymore. Satisfied. One of the cops asked to see messages. I hesitated, then handed my phone over. Scrolling through my own texts while someone else held my phone felt invasive in a way I can't fully explain. Like my private thoughts were being weighed for credibility. They read through enough to see the invite, the timestamps, the casual tone. The mood shifted after that. Not relief, but adjustment. The story changed shape. I wasn't the villain anymore, but I wasn't innocent either. I was now a complication, an inconvenience everyone needed to sort out. They told me I needed to leave. Not asked. Told. Said it would be best for everyone. I nodded and moved toward the door, my hands shaking just enough that I noticed. She tried to say something to me, but I did look back. I didn't trust myself to hear it without breaking. Outside, the street looked the same as before. Quiet. Normal. Like nothing had just imploded inside that apartment. I stood on the sidewalk for a second, breathing in the cold air, trying to ground myself. Then one of the cops followed me out. He asked me a few more questions. Name, address, whether I felt threatened. I answered honestly. Said I just wanted to go home. He nodded, handed me back my ID, and told me I was free to go. Free felt like a strange word after everything that had just happened. As I walked away, I heard raised voices through the door. Not words, just volume. Whatever they were dealing with now had nothing to do with me anymore. That didn't make me feel better. It just made me feel hollow. She messaged me later that night. Long explanations, apologies, reasons. I didn't open them. I could see the previews stacking up on my screen like they were trying to build a bridge back to normal. I didn't want it. Normal had already broken. For days after, I kept replaying it. The way she said it so casually. My ex still lived there, like it was a detail that didn't matter. Like I should have known how to navigate a situation she hadn't been honest about. I wondered how many other people she had brought over. How many times it had almost gone wrong. What scared me most was the cops or the accusation. It was how easily I had been placed into someone else's crisis. How fast my role changed from guest to suspect without my input. All because I trusted someone who left out one important sentence until it was too late. I haven't been back to that neighborhood since. not because of fear, but because I know exactly which door it was. I know how it felt to stand on that sidewalk afterward, realizing how close I came to something much worse. The night felt light in a way I didn't trust, but I didn't know why yet. Not exciting light, more like floating, like nothing had weight to it. I remember thinking on the walk there that this one might just pass through my life without leaving a mark. Just another name, another place, another story that fades. I couldn't have been more wrong, and the worst part is that nothing actually went wrong in the moment. It all waited until later. We met at this outdoor coffee spot that stayed open late and pretended to be a bar after dark. String lights overhead, wooden benches that always wobbled, music low enough that you had to lean in. It was one of those places where people take pictures of their drinks more than they drink them. She suggested it because it felt casual. I agreed because casual sounded safe. She was already there when I arrived, sitting sideways on the bench, scrolling. She looked up and smiled like she was relieved to see me in person, which instantly disarmed me. We hugged in that awkward half-second way and sat down across from each other. The vibe was easy. No nerves, no pressure, just two people killing time. We talked about normal stuff. Work, random opinions, places we like to hang out. She laughed a lot and leaned forward when she listened, which made me feel like what I was saying mattered. She didn't check her phone much, which stood out because everyone does. When she did, she kept it flat on the table, screen up, like she wasn't hiding anything. About halfway through, she asked to take a selfie together. It didn't feel weird in the moment. People do that now. Document everything. I hesitated for half a second, then leaned in. She held her phone up, adjusted the angle, took a couple quick shots, checked them, smiled, and put the phone back down. That was it. No posting right away. No explanation. Just another tiny thing in a night full of tiny things. The rest of the date stayed smooth. Nothing intense happened. No sparks flying, but no red flags either. We wrapped up naturally, walked a bit together, then split off. No promises, no pressure. She said she'd text me. I said cool. It felt like a clean ending. When I got home, I didn't think about her right away. I kicked off my shoes, threw my jacket on a chair, scrolled mindlessly for a while. It wasn't until later, when I was half awake and half zoned out, that I saw my face on my screen. It was a repost from someone I barely knew, a friend of a friend. The image took a second to register because my brain wasn't expecting it. Then it hit. It was the selfie. Cropped slightly, filtered but unmistakable, my face, her face. Our heads close together under those string lights. Above it was a title that made my stomach drop. Men I went on dates with this month. I sat up so fast my phone almost slipped out of my hand. My heart started racing, not from fear exactly, but from this sudden feeling of exposure. Like I had been placed somewhere I didn't consent to be, somewhere public and permanent. I clicked through to her page. The post was still there, fresh, already getting attention. Swipe after swipe of photos. Different places. Different guys. Same angle. Same smile on her face. Some looked confident. Some looked nervous. Some looked like they didn't even know the photo was taken until it was too late. There were captions under some of them. Vague notes. First date vibes. Second round potential. Undecided. No names, but it didn't matter. Faces were enough. Comments were already stacking up. People reacting, joking, guessing, ranking. My hands were shaking as I scrolled. I felt sick, but also weirdly frozen. I couldn't look away. I found myself searching for patterns. How many? How often? How recent? I realized I wasn't even near the top. My photo was somewhere in the middle, sandwiched between two others taken at places I recognized. I checked the timestamp. She had posted it less than an hour after we said goodbye. Suddenly, the entire night replayed itself with a new layer over it. The way she had suggested the place. The way she had angled the phone. The quick check after the photo. It went spontaneous. It was routine. I was a moment. I was content. What messed with me the most was that she dated multiple people. That's normal. It's the way she turned it into a public archive. A visual list. Something people could scroll through and comment on like a menu. I started noticing things I had at first. Some of the photos had the same lighting as mine, meaning she had probably gone from one date straight to another. Some bads were tagged by others in the comments without knowing it was them. People were asking questions about personalities based on faces alone. It felt invasive in a way I didn't have words for yet. I thought about messaging her, asking her to take it down, explaining how it made me feel. But the idea of that made my chest tighten. I didn't want to open a conversation where I had to justify my discomfort. I didn't want to be another entry she could summarize later. I checked my own messages. She had already texted me casual, like nothing was different, like my face wasn't currently part of a public collection. I didn't reply. Over the next hour, the post spread more. People shared it, screenshotted it. Someone made a joke thread about it. Another person commented asking for part 2 next month. The tone stayed light, which somehow made it worse. Like this was all just harmless fun, and I was the only one feeling weird about it. I zoomed in on my own face in the photo, the way I was leaning slightly toward her. The half smile I had, I looked comfortable. Trusting. It made my stomach twist. I didn't recognize myself in that context anymore. I tried to report the post, but there wasn't really a category that fit. It wasn't violent. It wasn't fake. It wasn't technically wrong. It was just something I didn't agree to, something that took a private moment and reframed it as public data. Eventually, she took the post down. Not because I asked, because someone else must have. Maybe multiple people. Maybe it got too much attention. I don't know. By that, it didn't matter. Screenshots exist forever. I knew that. She never apologized. She sent one message later saying she didn't think it was a big deal and that everyone dates like that now. That response hurt more than silence would have. It confirmed that I had never been a person in the situation, just an image. For a while after, I couldn't stop thinking about how easy it had been. One question, one quick photo, and suddenly I was part of a list I didn't know I was signing up for. It made me hyper-aware of cameras, of phones held at certain angles, of smiles that might not be about the moment at all. I didn't confront her. I didn't warn anyone else. I just disappeared from her digital orbit and tried to move on. But sometimes late at night, I wonder where that photo ended up. Who saved it? Who still has it on their phone with a dozen others like it? The creepiest part is that if I hadn't seen it, I would have gone to sleep thinking the night was fine, maybe even good. I would have remembered it as forgettable in a harmless way. Instead, it turned into something that stuck to me. Now, when someone asks to take a picture on a first date, I hesitate. Not because of the camera, but because I know how fast a moment can stop being yours. I knew something was off before my drink even hit the table, but I didn't have the words for it yet. It wasn't fear. It wasn't excitement either. It was this quiet pressure, like when someone stands too close behind you in line and you can't step away without making it weird. I remember thinking I was just rusty at dating, that I needed to relax and stop overanalyzing. I wish I had trusted that first uneasy pause instead of brushing it aside like lint. We met at a small sit-down place tucked between a gym and a dry cleaner. Nothing trendy. Laminated menus, dim lighting, booths that squeaked when you shifted your weight. He picked it because he said it was reliable. That word stuck with me later. Reliable. Like the place was a system that already knew how the night would go. He was there before me, already seated, already settled. His jacket was folded neatly beside him, his phone face down, his posture straight. He smiled when he saw me and stood up just enough to seem polite without making a big show of it. Everything about him felt controlled, like he had rehearsed the exact amount of friendliness to use. We sat down, and before I could even open the menu, he flagged the server over. I didn't think much of it until he started ordering. Not suggestions, not questions, decisions. He picked my drink, my food, even mentioned a substitution because he assumed I wouldn't like something spicy. He said it casually, like it was helpful, like he was saving me time. I laughed awkwardly and went along with it. I didn't want to seem difficult. I told myself it was just confidence, that some people find it attractive when someone takes charge. Still, I noticed how he did look at me when he did it. He was talking to the server, not including me, like I was already accounted for. Once the food was ordered, he leaned back and seemed satisfied, like a task had been completed. He asked a few surface-level questions about my work, my schedule, my weekends. I answered, but the questions felt less like curiosity and more like data collection. He nodded a lot. Not in an engaged way, but in a filing away way. Then he started talking about plans. Not hypotheticals. Not Maves. Actual plans. Next weekend dinner. The week after a show. A day trip a few weeks out. He spoke in a smooth flow, listing things like he was reading off a checklist. I tried to interrupt gently to slow it down, but he didn't really pause. He just adjusted the timeline slightly and kept going. My chest felt tight. I told myself I was just overwhelmed. Some people get excited. Some people move fast. I didn't want to project past stuff onto a new person. So I smiled and nodded and waited for the food to come, hoping it would break the momentum. When the plates arrived, he pushed mine toward me, already cut into neat sections like he had done it absent-mindedly. I stared at it for a second, then at him. He noticed and smiled, said something about manners without actually checking if I agreed. I felt like I was slipping into a role without realizing when the ovation happened. Halfway through eating, he pulled out his phone. Not to check messages. Not to scroll. He turned the screen toward me deliberately. He said he liked to be organized. Said it helped him feel grounded. Then he opened a shared Google Calendar. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Locks of color filled the screen, stacked and overlapping. Labels everywhere. Dates stretching forward. Then I saw it. My name. Typed clearly. Repeated. Week after week. Entire evenings blocked out. Dinners. Activities. Even notes attached to some of them. I felt dizzy. Like the room had tilted slightly and no one else noticed. I asked what it was, even though the answer was obvious. He explained it like it was normal. Like everyone did this. Said he liked to plan ahead so no one felt unsure. Said it was easier when expectations were clear. I scrolled without meaning to, months ahead. My name still there. Consistently. Unbroken. It wasn't just dates. There were reminders. Little notes about preferences he had assumed. Times he had decided I would be available. Days he had already pictured us together. I tried to laugh it off, said something about it being a bit much. He frowned slightly, like I had questioned a math problem he was confident about. He said he didn't see the issue. Said it showed commitment. Said he didn't want to waste time on uncertainty. That's when I realized something important. He was imagining possibilities. He was scheduling outcomes. There was no space in that calendar for my choices, just his projection of me. I felt trapped in my seat. Not physically, but socially. The place was quiet. Other people eating. No one paying attention. I wondered how many times he had done this before. How many names had filled those slots and then disappeared, or worse, stayed. I asked if he had shared it with me yet. He said not yet, but he could. Like that was a gift he was holding back. I imagined getting that notification. Seeing my own time carved up by someone else. My stomach turned. The rest of the date blurred. I barely tasted the food. I kept glancing at the exit, calculating how to leave without making a scene. He kept talking about future logistics. Holidays. Trips. Routines. He spoke like we were already past the part where you decide if you even like each other. When the check came, he grabbed it immediately. I didn't fight him. I didn't have the energy. He stood up confidently, already reaching for his jacket. He asked what day worked best for the next one. Not if there would be a next one. I stood up too and said I needed to think about things. He looked genuinely confused. Not hurt. Not angry. Confused. Like a plan had failed without explanation. He said he didn't understand why planning ahead was a problem. Said people complain about mixed signals all the time. Said he was just being clear. I didn't argue. I just said I needed space. That word seemed to irritate him more than anything else. Space wasn't something he had accounted for. Outside, the air felt cold and freeing. My hands were shaking. Not from fear exactly, but from the release of pressure I didn't realize I had been holding. He stood there for a moment like he was deciding whether to say more, then nodded stiffly and walked away without looking back. My phone buzzed before I even got home. A calendar invite. My name in the title. The first of many, I assumed. I stared at it for a long time without opening it. Then I declined it. Not tentatively. Fully. More invites followed. Different days. Adjusted times. Like he was troubleshooting availability instead of reading rejection. I blocked him after the third one. I hated that I had to do that. Hated that it felt necessary. Later, curiosity got the better of me. I created a fake account and looked him up. I found posts about planning, about efficiency, about relationships as systems, comments from people praising his organization, others quietly warning about control. I read through it enough to know this wasn't new behavior. What stuck with me was the calendar itself. It was how sure he was that my future could be arranged without me. How easily he saw my presence as a fixed variable. It made me question how often people decide who you are before you even sit down. I deleted the invite and cleared my own calendar that night. Nothing symbolic, just practical. I wanted to see blank space again, wanted to remember that my time was still mine. I haven't gone back to that place. Every booth there feels like it would hold the echo of that screen glowing between us. Sometimes I still think about all those blocks of color stretching forward, waiting for someone to fill them. Someone who might not realize until it's too late that their name is already written in. I didn't realize I was being watched until I felt it in my shoulders, that weird pressure like when someone stands too close behind you and your body reacts before your brain catches up. The night had started normal enough, almost boring, which is usually what I hope for. I wasn't chasing fireworks or chaos. I just wanted a drink, a conversation, and to go home without a story worth telling. Instead, I walked straight into one. We met this long, narrow bar that tried to look cozy but felt more like a hallway with alcohol. Exposed brick, mirrors everywhere, dim lights that made everyone look a little better than they actually were. It was loud but not club loud, just enough noise to blur conversations together. She suggested it because it was neutral ground. I remember thinking that phrase sounded mature. Neutral ground. Like there were no hidden motives attached. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small table near the wall, facing the bar. She smiled when she saw me and waved a little too enthusiastically, knocking her glass slightly. She apologized in that self-aware way that makes you relax instantly. We hugged awkwardly and sat down. Everything felt fine. Not amazing, but fine in a steady way. We ordered drinks and talked about surface-level stuff. Work frustrations, places we'd grown up, music we liked but didn't care enough to argue about. She laughed easily, but there was something tight about it, like it ended too fast each time. She kept glancing toward the bar behind me, not obviously, but enough that I noticed. I assumed she was people watching. Everyone does that in places like this. About 20 minutes in, I noticed a guy sitting at the bar who didn't fit the background noise. He wasn't loud or flashy, just still. Elbows on the counter, drink untouched, eyes drifting toward our table, more often than coincidence would explain. Every time I caught his reflection in the mirror behind the bar, he was looking our way. I tried not to read into it. Bars are full of strangers. Still, my body stayed slightly tense, like I was bracing for something without knowing what. She kept checking her phone, and putting it face down, and flipping it back over. The rhythm felt familiar in a bad way. Then she started to unravel. It went dramatic at first. Her eyes got glossy. Her smile stopped reaching her face. She took a breath that sounded like she was about to say something important, then stopped. I asked if she was okay. She nodded too fast, then shook her head, then pressed her lips together like she was holding something back physically. Tears welled up suddenly, catching me completely off guard. Not quiet tears either, the kind that spill over before you can stop them. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, embarrassed and overwhelmed all at once. People at near my tables glanced over and quickly looked away. The bar noise swallowed most of it, but not enough. She leaned forward, shoulders shaking slightly, and finally admitted the truth. Not in a clean confession way. More like it poured out because she couldn't hold it in anymore. She told me she wasn't really there for me. Not fully. She said she had only agreed to the date because she needed someone else to see her with someone new, someone specific. My stomach dropped as the pieces clicked together faster than I wanted them to. She didn't have to point. I already knew who she meant. The guy at the bar. The one who hadn't moved all night. The one who suddenly felt much closer than he should have. She cried harder as she explained, face burning red, hands trembling. She said she thought it would help. Thought it would make him realize what he was missing. Thought it would give her control back. She kept apologizing without actually looking at me, like eye contact would make it worse. I felt my chest tighten, not just from embarrassment, but from the realization that I wasn't even a participant in my own night. I was a prop. A signal. A tool meant to trigger someone else's reaction. My presence wasn't about connection. It was about visibility. I glanced toward the bar again. He was definitely watching now. Not hiding it. His jaw was clenched, eyes locked on us, drink still untouched. He looked angry, but not explosive angry. Focused angry, like he was taking mental notes. The way he watched made my skin crawl. Not because he was threatening, but because he was involved. Too involved. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't random overlap. This place had been chosen because he would be there. I was sitting exactly where I was meant to sit. She kept talking through tears, explaining their history in messy fragments. On and off. Unfinished arguments. Block numbers. Nights like this that never actually solved anything. She said she didn't expect it to feel this bad. She said seeing him watch her like that hurt more than she thought it would. I sat there listening, nodding automatically, my brain racing ahead. I thought about how many times she had glanced at the bar. How she had positioned her chair just enough to be visible from that angle. How she had leaned in close to me when she noticed his eyes on us. All those little movements that felt natural at the time suddenly felt rehearsed. People around us were definitely noticing now. Not enough to intervene, but enough to whisper. Someone laughed nearby, not about us, but it felt cruel anyway. The bartender glanced over with that tired look of someone who has seen too many emotional breakdowns in public places. I realized then that the situation wasn't just awkward. It was unsafe. Not violently, but socially and emotionally in a way that could turn fast. I didn't know what that guy was capable of. I didn't know how invested he was. I didn't want to be the spark that set something off. She finally looked up at me, eyes swollen, mascara streaked. She looked genuinely sorry. Not calculated sorry, just overwhelmed and stuck in her own spiral. I believed her remorse, but it didn't undo anything. I stood up slowly, careful not to make sudden movements. My legs felt stiff, like they had forgotten how to work. I told her I couldn't be part of this. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just stated it like a fact that had finally settled. She reached out instinctively, then pulled her hand back like she realized it would make things worse. The guy at the bar shifted in his seat, watching closely. That was enough for me. I grabbed my jacket and stepped away from the table. My heart was pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. I didn't look at him directly as I walked past the bar, but I could feel his eyes on me. Heavy. Assessing, like he was deciding something. Outside, the night air hit me like a reset button. Cool, sharp, grounding. I took a deep breath and kept walking, not stopping until I was half a block away. Only then did I slow down and let my shoulders drop. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Messages from her. Long ones. Apologies. Explanations. I didn't open them. I didn't block her either. I just couldn't engage. Not then. What stayed with me was the crying or the confession. It was a look on his face as he watched. The way the entire night had been staged around his presence. The way my role had been decided before I ever walked through the door. Later, replaying it all, I realized how close I had been to something worse. Not a fight necessarily, but being pulled into a triangle that had sharp edges on all sides. I had walked into someone else's unresolved story and almost become part of it permanently. For a while after, I caught myself scanning rooms when I went out. Noticing reflections, wondering who was watching and why. Not paranoid, just aware. Aware that sometimes you're not on a date. Sometimes you're a message being delivered. I never heard from her again after that night. Maybe she fixed things. Maybe she didn't. I don't really care. I just know that sometimes the scariest part of dating isn't rejection or heartbreak. It's realizing you were never the audience. You were the signal. I almost canceled when he insisted on cooking at his place, not because it sounded unsafe, but because it sounded like pressure disguised as romance. There is something about someone saying, "Trust me," with knives and heat, and timing on a first real hangout that feels like too much too soon. Still, I told myself to stop being dramatic. People cook for each other all the time. I wasn't walking into a horror movie. I was walking into an apartment with a stove. We had met a couple weeks earlier and kept things light. Memes, short voice notes, late night jokes that didn't go anywhere serious. He talked a lot about how he liked control, but said it in a way that sounded like organization, not dominance. He told me he hated restaurants because they were unpredictable. Cooking, he said, was how he showed effort. I ignored the little voice in my head that wondered effort for who. His place was a small second-floor apartment above a row of quiet shops. The stairs smelled like old cleaning spray and something fried that never fully left the building. When he opened the door, he looked nervous but excited, like a kid about to show off a science project. The apartment itself was clean in a rushed way. Counters wiped but cluttered. Candles lit even though the sun was still out. Music already playing, a little too loud. He gave me a quick tour like it mattered, pointing out things I didn't ask about. His couch, his knives, his spice rack. He lingered on the kitchen, clearly proud. I sat on a stool near the counter like he told me to, feeling more like an audience than a guest. He said I should relax and let him handle everything. I nodded and watched. At first it was kind of funny. He moved fast, talking faster, narrating his steps even though I didn't need it. Oil into the pan. Heat up. Meat ready. He had this jittery energy that made it hard to tell if he was confident or barely holding it together. I offered to help and he waved it off immediately. Said it would ruin the flow. The smell of oil heating started to change. It went from normal to sharp in a way that made my nose sting. I noticed smoke creeping up toward the ceiling, thin at first, then thicker. I mentioned it casually, not wanting to interrupt his zone. He brushed it off and turned the heat higher, said it needed more intensity. Then the pan flared. It wasn't a small flame. It wasn't dramatic movie fire either. It was sudden and wrong, like the stove had snapped. Flames shot up higher than the pan, licking toward the cabinet above. The smoke alarm went off instantly, piercing and loud, bouncing off the walls. My body reacted before my brain did. I slid off the stool and stepped back. He froze. Not for long, but long enough that I noticed. His eyes went wide, mouth open, hands hovering uselessly. Then he started moving all at once, grabbing things, slapping at the flames with a towel, which made it worse. The fire jumped, spread along the edge of the pan, roaring louder. I told him to turn off the stove. I don't know if he heard me over the alarm. He fumbled with the knob and missed it the first time. Smoke filled the room fast now, thick and burning. My eyes watered. My chest tightened. Then he did the worst possible thing. In pure panic, no thinking, no pause, he turned away from me, unzipped, and peed on the stove. For a split second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. The absurdity of it stalled everything. Then the smell hit. Sharp and unmistakable, mixing with burning oil and smoke. The flames sputtered but didn't go out completely. The fire seemed offended, like it had been challenged. I stood there stunned, heart pounding, watching a grown man lose all grip on reality in his own kitchen. The alarm kept screaming. Smoke poured into the hallway. Somewhere below us, a door slammed. He realized it wasn't working and backed away, panicking harder, slipping slightly on the wet floor, shouting apologies to no one in particular. He grabbed his phone with shaking hands and called for help, his voice cracking as he explained there was a fire. I moved to the door, coughing, pulling it open to get air. Neighbors were already coming out, confused and alarmed. Someone shouted about calling emergency services even though he already had. The hallway filled with smoke fast. I could hear footsteps on the stairs. He kept looking at me, eyes wild, begging without words. Hands out, face red, hair damp with sweat. I felt this weird mix of fear and secondhand embarrassment, so intense it made my stomach twist. I wanted to vanish. The firefighters arrived faster than I expected, boots pounding, voices cutting through the chaos with calm authority. They moved past me like I was furniture, focused on the kitchen. Within minutes, the flames were gone, the stove off, windows open, the alarm silenced. The apartment looked wrecked, black marks on the wall, soaked floor, the smell lingering in layers that would never fully leave. One of them asked if anyone was hurt. I shook my head. My hands were still shaking. He tried to explain himself, tried to laugh it off, tried to apologize to everyone at once. He kept glancing at me, desperation all over his face, like I was the final judge. He begged for another chance right there in front of strangers, like this was a normal moment for negotiation. I didn't respond. I could. The entire situation felt unreal, like a stress dream that kept escalating without logic. One of the firefighters pulled him aside to talk. Another opened more windows. A neighbor stared openly from the hallway. I stepped outside without asking. The night air felt cold and clean compared to the apartment. I leaned against the railing and breathed deeply, trying to slow my heart. Below me, someone had started filming with their phone. I turned away. After a while, one of the firefighters came out and told me it was safe to leave if I wanted. That sentence felt like permission to reclaim my body. I nodded and grabbed my bag from just inside the door, careful not to look at the kitchen again. He followed me to the doorway, still pleading, still trying to salvage something that had burned itself to ash. I didn't engage. I just walked down the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. Outside, emergency lights painted the street red and blue. People watched from across the road. The whole block smelled like smoke. I walked past it all and kept going until the noise faded. My phone buzzed with messages before I'd even reached the corner. Apologies, explanations, jokes trying to soften it. I didn't open them. I didn't need more images burned into my brain. Later that night, sitting alone in my live, I replayed it all in slow motion. The confidence, the control. The moment it all collapsed under heat and panic. It wasn't just the fire or what he did. It was how fast he fell apart when things stopped going his way. I washed my clothes twice and still smelled smoke. My hair held onto it for days. Every time I cooked after that, I watched the pan like it might betray me too. I never saw him again. He stopped messaging after a day. Maybe embarrassment caught up. Maybe something else did. I don't really care. All I know is that sometimes people want to impress you so badly that they forget basic sense. And sometimes you end up standing in a stranger's kitchen, watching their life catch fire in real time, realizing you were never meant to be there in the first place. I should have trusted the weird feeling I got when she asked what bank I used before she asked what music I liked. It wasn't loud or alarming, just this small internal pause, like my brain tripped over something it didn't expect to be on the path. I laughed it off in the moment because laughing is easier than confronting something you don't fully understand yet. I didn't know then that the entire night was basically an interview I didn't apply for. We met at this quiet lounge that tried way too hard to feel calm. Lots of plants, low couches, drinks with ingredients I couldn't pronounce. She picked it because she said it was peaceful and mature. That word again. Mature. She said it like it mattered a lot. I showed up early and sat there scrolling on my phone, watching couples sink into cushions like they were melting into the furniture. She arrived exactly on time, which already felt intentional. Not rushed, not late, just precise. She hugged me lightly and sat down across from me, crossing her legs neatly like she had practiced the movement. Everything about her felt put together. Hair perfect, outfit clean, no fidgeting. I felt underdressed just existing next to her. The first few minutes were normal enough. Where I worked, where I was from, basic stuff. Then the questions shifted. She asked how long I had been at my job. Not what I did there, but how long. Then she asked if it was stable. She used that word. Stable, I answered honestly, thinking she was just making conversation. Then she asked if I had ever missed rent. I blinked, laughed, and said no, joking that I was doing okay. She nodded slowly, like she was checking something off in her head. She asked if I preferred renting or owning. I said renting. She asked why. I gave a vague answer about flexibility. She nodded again, eyes focused, not smiling. I started to feel it then. The pattern. The way each question stacked on top of the last. Not curiosity, but calculation. I tried to steer things back to lighter ground. Asked about her hobbies, her weekends, things that didn't involve spreadsheets. She answered, briefly, like those things were filler between more important topics. She asked if I had student loans. I joked that this was starting to feel like a background check. I expected her to laugh with me and back off. Instead, she smiled politely and leaned in a little. That's when she admitted it. She told me she was screening for stability. She said it casually, like it was a diet preference. Said she had dated too many broke guys and was tired of it. Said she wasn't trying to be rude, just efficient. She said she didn't want to waste time anymore. The word efficient landed hard. I felt my chest tighten, not because I was offended exactly, but because something about the way she said it erased the human part of the interaction. I was the person she was getting to know. I was a risk assessment. She kept going, explaining her system without realizing how unsettling it sounded. How she had learned to ask early. How she noticed patterns. How emotional availability didn't matter if someone couldn't handle money. She talked about it like she'd cracked a code. I nodded along, but my brain was buzzing. I started replaying the night from the beginning, the place she picked, the timing, the posture, the way she watched my reactions more than my words. It all felt different now, colder. She asked if I had savings. I said yes. She asked how much time it could cover. I deflected with a joke. She didn't laugh. She just waited. I answered vaguely, feeling like I was being cornered into revealing parts of my life that should be required for a drink and a conversation. I noticed she wasn't sharing anything equivalent. She talked about standards, not her own situation. She talked about lessons learned, not mistakes made. It was one-sided in a way that felt intentional. Around us, people were relaxing, laughing softly, leaning into each other. The contrast made it worse. I felt like I was sitting across from someone doing a silent audit while pretending it was a date. At one point, she pulled out her phone. Not to show me something cute or funny. She opened her notes app. I couldn't see what was written, but I could see the structure. Bullet points, short phrases. She glanced at it quickly, then back at me. I don't think she meant for me to notice, but I did. My stomach dropped. I asked what she was looking at. She hesitated, then said it was just reminders. I didn't push, but the image stuck in my head. A list somewhere with categories and names and outcomes. Pass or fail. I started getting shorter answers, less detail. I could feel myself pulling back, putting up walls. She noticed and asked if she had upset me. I said I was just surprised. She nodded again, that same calm nod, and said she appreciated honesty. The rest of the date felt off balance. She seemed satisfied, like she had gathered what she needed. She relaxed more, smiled more, asked fewer questions. That somehow made it worse, like I had crossed some invisible threshold. When the check came, she watched to see how I reacted. I noticed that too. I paid without comment, not because I wanted to impress her, but because I wanted the night to end without another test. She thanked me and suggested we do this again soon. I didn't commit. I said maybe. She didn't seem bothered. She looked confident, like she already knew the answer she wanted. Outside, the air felt heavy. I walked a bit with her, then we split ways. She hugged me again, this time a little tighter, like she felt secure. I walked home alone, replaying everything, trying to figure out why it felt so disturbing. It wasn't that she cared about money. That's normal. It was the way she reduced people to numbers before even knowing them. The way she framed past relationships as mistakes to be optimized away. The way she talked about broke guys like they were a phase she had outgrown, not people she had chosen and discarded. Later that night, she messaged me, thanked me for being open, said she felt good about me. That phrase stuck with me. Felt good about me. Not with me, about me, like I was a product she had researched. I didn't respond right away. I sat there staring at the message, imagining what the next few dates would look like. More questions, more screens, more evaluations disguised as concern. I imagined her telling her friends she had found someone stable, like that was the highest compliment. I eventually replied politely and said I didn't feel the same. She asked why. I told her honestly that I didn't like feeling assessed. She replied with a long message about standards and boundaries and knowing her worth. I didn't argue. I just let the conversation end. What stayed with me wasn't rejection or disappointment. It was the realization that dating can turn into something transactional without anyone noticing. That you can sit across from someone and slowly disappear into a checklist. Now, when someone asks me oddly specific questions early on, I notice. Not with suspicion, just awareness. I pay attention to whether curiosity flows both ways or only in one direction. I pay attention to whether I'm being known or measured. That night didn't explode. It didn't end in drama. It just quietly showed me how easy it is to stop being a person in someone else's story and start being a requirement. I didn't expect the night to turn into a public audit of someone else's marriage, but that's what happens when you trust a calm voice and a clean story. It started off smooth in a way that made me lower my guard too fast. The kind of smooth that makes you think maybe you finally stepped out of the mess into something simple. I remember walking to the place feeling oddly optimistic, like this might be one of those dates that doesn't turn into anything dramatic. I couldn't have been more wrong. We met at a small neighborhood restaurant that tried to feel intimate without being fancy. Low ceilings, warm lights, mismatched chairs, the kind of place people go when they want to talk without shouting. He suggested it because he said it felt honest. I liked that word at the time. Honest. It felt reassuring. We had been talking for a couple weeks and everything lined up. Replies made sense. Stories didn't shift. When I asked about past relationships, he said he was divorced. Not separated. Not complicated. Divorced. He said it plainly, without bitterness, like it was just a chapter that had ended. I didn't dig. I didn't want to pry. Sometimes people just move on. He was already seated when I arrived, relaxed, smiling, looking like someone who knew how to be present. We hugged briefly and sat down. The conversation flowed easily. He listened. He laughed at the right moments. He didn't overshare or dodge questions. He talked about rebuilding his life, about routines, about finally feeling settled. Nothing about it felt rehearsed. Halfway through dinner, I noticed him glancing toward the door every so often. Not nervously, just checking. I assumed it was a habit. Some people do that without thinking. I didn't want to read into it. Then the door opened and everything in the room shifted. She did storm in. She didn't shout. She walked in with purpose, eyes locked straight ahead, holding a thick stack of papers in one hand like it was evidence instead of trash. I noticed her before he did. My stomach tightened instantly, the way it does when your body senses trouble before your brain catches up. She stopped at our table and placed the papers down hard enough that the silverware rattled. The sound cut through the room like a slap. People nearby went quiet, pretending not to stare while absolutely staring. His face drained of color. Not confusion, recognition. She stood there, breathing heavy but controlled, eyes bouncing between him and me. Then she turned her attention fully to me. She asked which lies he had told me. Not if he had lied. Which ones? I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, like it had closed up on its own. My brain scrambled to keep up, replaying every conversation we had ever had, every detail I had taken at face value. She started pulling papers from the stack and spreading them across the table. Printed messages, screenshots, dates and times highlighted. My name wasn't on them, but the timing was impossible to ignore. Messages sent to her while he was talking to me. Messages that contradicted everything he had claimed about his situation. She wasn't yelling. That's what made it worse. She was calm in a sharp, focused way, like someone who had already cried at home and come here for clarity, not chaos. She explained that they were not divorced, not even close, still legally married, still live in the same house, still arguing about bills and schedules and promises that kept getting broken. She wanted to know what version of him I had been given. She wanted to compare notes. I sat there frozen, hands in my lap, feeling that the floor had dropped out beneath me. People around us were watching openly now. Forks paused midair. Conversation stalled. The server hovered nearby, unsure whether to intervene. He finally tried to say something, hands up, shaking slightly. She cut him off immediately, not with volume but with certainty. She turned another page and slid it toward me. Messages where he talked about being free, about starting fresh, about not being tied to anyone anymore. Every word felt like it burned a little. I managed to tell her what he had said, that he told me he was divorced, that he said it was finalized, that he said he was live alone. Saying it out loud made me feel stupid, even though I knew it wasn't my fault. It felt like confessing to a crime I didn't commit. She nodded slowly, like she had expected that answer, like it fit perfectly into a pattern she already knew too well. She looked tired more than angry, tired in a way that felt heavy and permanent. She gathered the papers back into a stack and told him she was done covering for him, done letting him rewrite reality depending on who he was talking to. She said this was about me, but she wanted me to know exactly who was sitting across from me. Then she left, just like that. No scene, no tears. She walked out with the same controlled pace she had walked in with, leaving silence behind her like smoke. The restaurant stayed quiet for a few seconds too long. Then noise rushed back in awkwardly. People pretended to go back to their meals. The server finally stepped in and asked if everything was okay. I nodded without thinking, even though nothing was. He looked at me with panic all over his face. Not remorse. Not embarrassment. Panic. Like he was scrambling to salvage something that had already collapsed. He tried to explain, words tumbling over each other, timelines shifting, justifications stacking up too fast to track. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My head was buzzing, my chest tight. I felt exposed, like I had just been dragged into the middle of a private war without armor. I stood up slowly, legs shaky, and grabbed my bag. He reached out instinctively, then pulled his hand back. I didn't look at him. I didn't want his face burned into my memory alongside everything else. Outside, the night air felt sharp and grounding. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing deeply, letting the reality settle. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Messages from him. Apologies. Explanations. Long paragraphs that tried to reshape the truth into something softer. I didn't open them. As I walked home, I kept replaying the moment she asked me which lies he told me. Not if. Which. That word haunted me. It meant this was a one-time slip. It was a system, a rotating set of truths he handed out depending on what he needed. Later that night, curiosity got the better of me. I looked him up. Not obsessively, just enough. I found traces of her. Photos still up. Comments still active. Posts that contradicted everything he had said. The timeline lined up too perfectly to ignore. I felt this mix of anger and relief. Anger that I had been pulled into something so messy without consent. Relief that it had exploded before I got any deeper, before I believed the story long enough to defend it myself. He kept messaging for a few days, each one shifting slightly in tone. Regret, blame, confusion, promises. I never replied. Eventually, it stopped. What stayed with me was the embarrassment of the public scene. It was how calmly he had lied, how easily he had carried two versions of his life without flinching. How close I came to becoming another person holding printed messages, standing in a restaurant, asking someone else what version of the truth they had been fed. Now, when someone says they are divorced, I notice how they say it. Not with suspicion, just attention. I notice whether the story feels finished or still bleeding. That night did teach me a lesson. It just showed me how thin the line is between a date and a confrontation you never signed up for. How easily you can end up sitting at a table covered in someone else's secrets, realizing too late that honesty was never on the menu. The moment she stood up and said she needed the bathroom, I remember thinking how normal it all felt. That was the problem. Nothing felt sharp or wrong yet. The night had settled into that comfortable middle space where you stop checking the time and start leaning back in your chair. I had no idea that was the exact second everything quietly ended for me without my permission. We met at a mid-sized bar near the river, one of those places that tries to look casual, but has just enough lighting and mirrors to make you aware of yourself at all times. Exposed pipes, scratched wood tables, music low enough to talk but loud enough to hide pauses. She picked it because she said it was neutral. I liked that word. Neutral sounded safe. We had been talking for a couple weeks, nothing intense. Just enough to feel like meeting made sense. She was funny in a low-key way and didn't overshare, which I appreciated. No trauma dumping, no dramatic backstory. She said she liked things simple. I believed her. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting in a booth near the back. She smiled easily, scooted over to make room, and everything felt relaxed right away. Conversation flowed without effort. Not fireworks, but steady. The kind of night you could imagine repeating without stress. About 20 minutes in, I noticed her phone sitting face down between us. Not suspicious on its own, but she kept glancing at it every few minutes. Not checking it, just acknowledging it was there. I didn't think much of it. People do that when they're waiting on a friend or a ride or just out of habit. She asked me questions that felt normal. Where I worked, how I spent weekends, whether I liked staying in or going out. She laughed at my answers and shared similar stories. Nothing felt forced. If anything, it felt almost too smooth. Then she excused herself to use the bathroom. I watched her walk toward the back, weaving between tables, disappearing past the hallway that led to the restrooms. I picked up my drink and took a sip, scrolling my phone absent-mindedly. I didn't start counting time until I realized a song had ended and another started. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I told myself not to be weird about it. Lines happen. Bathrooms get crowded. People get distracted. I stayed seated, finished my drink, ordered another. The bartender asked if I wanted the same. I nodded. 15 minutes. I started scanning the room without meaning to. The hallway stayed empty. No sign of her coming back. I checked my phone. No messages. I debated sending one, then decided against it. I didn't want to be that person after 15 minutes. 20 minutes. That's when someone slid into the booth across from me. I looked up expecting maybe the bartender or someone asking if the seat was taken. Instead, it was a guy I hadn't seen before. Mid-30s maybe. Calm posture. Neutral expression. He sat down like he belonged there, like this was his seat all along. My first thought was that he was confused. He didn't look confused. He looked relieved. He leaned back slightly and thanked me. Not sarcastically. Not angrily. Genuinely thanked me. He said I had helped confirm his suspicions. My brain lagged hard. The words didn't land right away. I stared at him, waiting for context that didn't come fast enough. My chest tightened. He explained it calmly, like he was walking me through a process he had already accepted. He said she was his girlfriend. Not ex. Not complicated. Girlfriend. He said he had been worried for a while. Late nights. Vague plans. Stories that did line up. He said when she told him she was meeting a friend, something did sit right, so he followed her. Followed her. He gestured vaguely toward the bar around us, like this entire place was part of his explanation. He said he had been sitting nearby the whole time watching how she laughed, watching how she leaned in, watching how comfortable it all looked. He said when she got up to go to the bathroom, she didn't actually go. She slipped out the back door instead. Apparently they had argued earlier that day. Apparently this was her way of proving something to herself or to him or to both. Apparently I had been the test. My mouth felt dry. I couldn't think of a single thing to say that wouldn't make it worse. I kept replaying the night in my head, searching for signs I had missed. The phone, the glances, the choice of seat near the back. He wasn't angry at me. That was the worst part. He kept reassuring me that I wasn't in trouble, that he didn't blame me. He said he appreciated me, said I seemed like a decent person, said it helped him see things clearly. I didn't want to be appreciated by a stranger who had just told me I was unknowingly part of his relationship investigation. I asked where she was now, even though I didn't want the answer. He said she had left, said she wasn't answering his messages, said she probably wouldn't come back tonight. He said it like he had already accepted that outcome. I looked around the bar again, suddenly aware of how public this all was. People laughing, glasses clinking, a game playing on a screen above the bar, the world continuing exactly the same while my sense of reality tilted sideways. He thanked me again, said he wouldn't keep me, said he just wanted to let me know what had really been happening. He stood up and left without drama, disappearing into the crowd like he had never been there. I sat there alone in the booth, staring at the spot where she had been sitting. Her drink was still there, untouched since she stood up. Condensation ring forming on the table like a timestamp. The bartender came by and asked if everything was okay. I nodded automatically and asked for the check. My hands were shaking just enough that I noticed when I reached for my wallet. As I walked out, I glanced toward the hallway one last time, half expecting her to come back and laugh it off. She did. The hallway stayed empty. Outside, the night air felt heavier than before. I stood on the sidewalk for a minute, breathing slowly, trying to understand how I had gone from a normal date to an unknowing participant in someone else's relationship crisis. My phone buzzed. A message from her. Short, apologetic, vague. She said she was sorry I pulled into it. Said she did think it would go that way. Didn't explain what way she thought it would go. I didn't reply. I walked home replaying the moment she stood up. How casual it had been. How easy it was for her to disappear and leave me to deal with the aftermath. What stuck with me was the betrayal. It was the way she used my presence as proof instead of connection. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the booth, the empty seat, the guy sliding in like it was planned. I wondered how long he had been watching, whether he had timed it, whether she knew he would confront me instead of her. I never heard from either of them again after that night. No follow-up. No explanation. The whole thing just stopped, like a show ending mid-episode. For a long time after, whenever someone excused themselves during a date, my chest tightened just a little. Not panic, just awareness. Awareness that sometimes when someone leaves the table, they don't just step away. Sometimes they exit the story entirely and leave you holding the context you never asked for. That night didn't explode. It didn't end with yelling or chaos. It just quietly confirmed that I had been standing in the wrong place at the wrong time, helping someone else answer a question I didn't even know existed. I didn't feel scared at first, which is the part that messes with me now. The night didn't start with alarms or red flags or anything that would have warned me. It started with a kind of calm that makes you lower your shoulders without realizing it. I remember thinking I could finally stop being on edge for one night. That thought didn't even make it to the end of dinner. We met at a lounge attached to a hotel downtown. Not fancy, not sketchy, just neutral. Low lights, clean tables, quiet music. He picked it because he said it was central and safe. I liked that word. Safe. I told a friend where I was going anyway, just out of habit, and walked in feeling normal. He was already there sitting upright, hands folded, smiling like he had practiced it in a mirror. He stood when he saw me, pulled out my chair, did all the right polite things. I remember thinking he was a little intense, but in a focused way, not a threatening one. He talked a lot about connection and honesty early on, which I thought was just first date oversharing. The date itself wasn't bad. Not amazing, but fine. Conversation moved easily enough. He asked thoughtful questions and listened closely to the answers, sometimes too closely. He repeated things I said back to me later, word for word, like he was proving he paid attention. I brushed it off as enthusiasm. About an hour in, I started feeling tired. Not bored, just done. Kind of done where you know you're not interested enough to keep going. I told him I was going to head out soon. I expected a polite nod, maybe a little disappointment. What I got instead was resistance. Not loud, not aggressive, just firm. He leaned forward slightly and said the night didn't feel finished yet. Said we were just getting somewhere. Said leaving now would cut things off before they had a chance. His tone stayed calm, which somehow made it worse. I laughed awkwardly and repeated that I had an early morning. He shook his head slowly, like I had misunderstood something simple. When I stood up and reached for my bag, he stayed seated, but his eyes followed every move. He said we should at least plan the next time before I went. I said I wasn't ready to do that. He smiled tightly and said that wasn't fair. I remember the exact moment my stomach dropped. It wasn't when he spoke. It was when I realized the exit was behind him. I tried to step around the table and he stood up too, not touching me, just positioning himself in a way that blocked the path, still smiling, still calm. He said he needed reassurance, said he had been let on before, said he didn't want to feel used. Every word was framed like he was the one at risk. I told him I needed to leave. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He didn't move. Instead, he asked me to promise I would see him again. Not suggest. Ask. Promise. People around us were talking, laughing, completely unaware. The music kept playing. The bar felt suddenly too quiet and too loud at the same time. I looked around for a staff member, but no one was close enough to catch my eye without making it obvious. I tried to step past him again, and he shifted to block me, still not touching me, still technically polite. He said I was making it awkward, said if I just agreed to another date, this would be uncomfortable anymore. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I realized then that he wasn't angry. He was practiced. He wasn't improvising. He was following a pattern that had worked before. I stopped trying to move and instead raised my voice just enough for the table next to us to hear. Not shouting, just louder than necessary. I said I felt uncomfortable and needed space. Heads turned. Conversation slowed. His smile finally cracked just a little. Before he could respond, someone else did. A security guard approached from behind him. Calm. Direct. Professional. They asked him to step away from the table. He tried to argue, said it was a misunderstanding. The guard didn't budge. Another guard joined them. That's when I knew this was their first time dealing with him. One of them turned to me and asked if I was okay. I nodded, my hands shaking. They asked if I knew him well. I said no. They exchanged a look that said everything without words. They told him he needed to leave. He resisted verbally, insisting he just wanted clarity, just wanted reassurance. One of the guards told him he had been warned before. Told him there were reports. Multiple women. Same behavior. Refusing to let them leave until they agreed to see him again. He went quiet then, not embarrassed. Angry. His eyes flicked to me once, sharp and blaming, like this was my fault for not playing along. They escorted him out while he protested. People stared openly now. The illusion of a normal night completely gone. I sat back down, legs weak, trying to breathe through the adrenaline flooding my body. A staff member brought me water without asking. The guards checked in again, asked if I wanted to file a report. I said no, not because it didn't matter, but because I just wanted to go home. They walked me to the door anyway, making sure I got out without him nearby. Outside, the night air hit me like a wave. My entire body felt light and heavy at the same time. I leaned against the wall and breathed, letting the shaking slow down. One of the guards told me I had done the right thing by speaking up. Told me I was the first. Told me I probably would be the last. That sentence stuck with me more than anything else. I walked home instead of calling a ride, needing the movement to burn off the energy still buzzing in my chest. Every step felt unreal, like I had almost stepped into something much worse and only barely avoided it. Later that night, he messaged me, apologizing, minimizing, saying security overreacted, saying he just cared too much. I blocked him without replying. For days after, I replayed the moment he blocked the exit. How subtle it had been. How easy it would have been to doubt myself. How his calmness almost convinced me I was the one being unreasonable. What scared me most was that he did it. It was that he had done it before. That it was a routine. That he had probably refined it over time, learning how far he could go without crossing lines that would get him stopped sooner. Now, whenever someone resists a boundary, even gently, I pay attention. Not with fear, just clarity. I remember how quickly a normal night can turn into something else without raising its voice. I got lucky that night. Not because he stopped, but because someone else stepped in who already knew his pattern. Sometimes I think about the other women, the ones who might have promised just to get out, the ones who might have blamed themselves for feeling trapped. That thought sits heavy even now. That night ended cleanly. I went home. I locked my door. I slept. But the awareness stayed. The knowledge that sometimes danger doesn't look dangerous at all. Sometimes it looks like a polite smile and a blocked exit and a request that isn't really a request. The moment she asked if I trusted her, I remember feeling oddly proud of myself for not overthinking it. The question did sound sinister. It sounded intimate, like one of those soft checkpoints people use to feel closer. I nodded without hesitation, not realizing that the word trust was about to be used against me in a way I didn't even know was possible yet. We met at this trendy rooftop spot that pretended to be casual while clearly aiming for attention. String lights everywhere, half walls you could lean against, city noise floating up from below. She picked it because she said it felt alive. I got there early and stood near the railing, watching traffic crawl like glowing ants, trying to calm my nerves. She arrived with her phone already in her hand, smiling wide, energy turned all the way up. She hugged me like we already knew each other well, even though we did. She talked fast, laughed faster, and kept adjusting her phone on the table like it couldn't quite find a comfortable spot. I noticed it, but I didn't question it. Everyone clings to their phone now. It's basically another limb. The first part of the date felt normal enough. Drinks, small talk, jokes that landed, a few awkward pauses that didn't linger too long. She asked good questions and reacted big to the answers, nodding and smiling like she was really invested. Every few minutes, she glanced down at her screen and typed something quickly, then locked it again. I assumed she was messaging a friend. About half an hour in, she leaned forward and asked me again if I trusted her. The repetition should have been a warning, but it wasn't. I laughed and said sure, wondering why she was asking like that. She smiled in a way that felt excited, almost relieved. That's when she tilted her phone slightly and I saw it. A live stream interface. Comments rolling upward too fast to read. Hearts popping up along the side of the screen like confetti. My brain stalled. I stared at the screen, then at her, then back at the screen. She did hide it. She angled it toward me like she was showing me a picture, waiting for my reaction. She admitted it casually, like she was explaining a hobby. She had been live streaming the date the entire time. Not just video, but audio too. Apparently her followers liked real moments. Liked watching her go on dates and react in real time. She said it made things more fun. I felt heat rush to my face. My chest tightened. I asked how many people were watching. She glanced at the number and said without hesitation, hundreds. I looked around the rooftop, suddenly hyper-aware of how public everything already was. Strangers sitting nearby, city lights, the open sky. And now, hundreds of unseen eyes judging from behind screens. She told me not to worry, said she did show my name, said she did even show my full face most of the time. She said people were voting on whether I was worth keeping. That phrase landed like a punch. Worth keeping. She scrolled slightly and showed me the poll. 2 options, yes or no. Percentages shifting in real time. Comments flying by with opinions about my posture, my voice, my answers to questions I didn't even know were being analyzed. Some comments were harmless. Some weren't. People guessing my intentions, reading my energy, saying I looked boring or safe or promising. Strangers reducing me to traits based on a half hour of footage I didn't consent to. I told her to turn it off. My voice shook despite my effort to keep it calm. She hesitated, glancing at the screen again, watching the numbers update. She said she would, but wanted to wait for the poll to finish. Said it was almost done. Almost done. Like my discomfort at a countdown. I felt trapped in a way I had never felt before. Not physically, but socially and digitally. If I stood up and left, it would all be on camera. My reaction would become content too. If I stayed, I was agreeing to be evaluated. I noticed people nearby starting to look over, not because they knew what was happening, but because they could sense tension. She kept smiling at the phone, reacting to comments, laughing softly. It was like I wasn't even there anymore. I was just a subject. The poll ended. She announced the result out loud, excited. The majority voted yes. She looked at me like I should feel honored, like I had passed some test I never signed up for. I felt sick. She finally ended the stream after that, tapping the screen and setting the phone face down. The sudden silence felt heavy. My ears rang. She asked if I was okay, like she had just surprised me with a gift instead of violating my trust. I told her I needed to leave. My hands were shaking now. No point hiding it. She looked confused, then slightly annoyed. She said people loved me. Said the chat thought I was a good pick. Said we could do another stream next time, maybe with better lighting. I stood up, chair scraping loudly against the floor. A few heads turned. I didn't care anymore. I told her I never agreed to be broadcast. She shrugged and said everyone signs up for public dating now, whether they realize it or not. That sentence scared me more than the live stream. I walked away without looking back, pushing through the crowd, heart pounding. The elevator ride down felt endless. My phone buzzed nonstop in my pocket. Notifications, tags, messages from people I didn't know somehow finding my account. By the time I got outside, I was already trending in a tiny corner of the internet I didn't want to know existed. Clips, screenshots, people arguing in comments about whether I was authentic or not. She messaged me almost immediately, apologizing, but also defending herself, saying it wasn't personal, saying this was how she dated now, saying if I couldn't handle it, maybe I wasn't as confident as she thought. I blocked her. For hours after, I sat in my living staring at my phone, watching the notifications slow down. I felt exposed in a way that lingered long after the screen went dark. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was the realization that my image and words were now out there, judged and archived by people who would never know me. The next day, a friend sent me a link, a repost of the stream. My face blurred this time, but my voice was still there. Comments still arguing, still voting, like the poll never really ended. I reported it. Some of it came down. Some of it didn't. That's the thing about the internet. Once something is out there, it doesn't really belong to you anymore. What stayed with me was the live stream itself. It was how easily she framed trust as permission. How she asked the question knowing exactly what she was about to do. How she let strangers decide my value while smiling at me like it was harmless fun. Now, when someone asks if I trust them early on, my chest tightens just a little. Not because trust is bad, but because I know how easily it can be twisted into consent you never gave. That night didn't end with shouting or chaos. It ended quietly with me walking home under streetlights, trying to remember what it felt like to exist without being observed. I didn't catch the lies right away, which is probably what bothered me the most afterward. They weren't dramatic or bold or obviously fake. They were small, almost polite, like they were designed to slide past without making noise. That's what made the night feel wrong in a way I couldn't explain until it was already too late. We met at a late-night diner that still smelled like coffee even though half the machines were off. Cracked Bible boots, buzzing lights, menus with fingerprints baked into the plastic. He suggested it because he said it felt honest. I remember liking that word when he said it. Honest. It sounded reassuring, like a promise without effort. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in the booth with his jacket draped neatly beside him. He stood up to greet me and smiled in a way that looked practiced but not fake enough to be alarming. I slid into the booth across from him and everything felt easy for the first few minutes. Jokes landed. Eye contact felt normal. Nothing felt forced. The first lie was almost nothing. He said he had never been to that diner before, even though he ordered immediately without looking at the menu. I noticed it but didn't say anything. People say stuff like that all the time. Maybe he meant recently. Maybe he forgot. I let it go. Then he said he didn't really drink coffee, but he asked the server for it as usual. Again, small. Maybe a joke. Maybe a habit. I shrugged it off. As the night went on, they stacked up quietly. He said he lived across town, then later mentioned walking to the place. He said he loved dogs but couldn't remember the name of the breed he claimed to own. He said he hated social media, then referenced comments on a post he supposedly didn't see. None of it was enough on its own. It was the pattern that started to itch at the back of my brain, like a puzzle with pieces that almost fit but not quite. I started paying closer attention, not suspicious yet, just curious. When I asked follow-up questions, he adjusted his answers smoothly, not defensively, not nervously, like he was editing in real time. It was impressive in a way that made me uncomfortable. The diner felt quieter as time passed, like the world was narrowing around our booth. I noticed how relaxed he was, not anxious about being caught, not worried about consistency. He seemed almost amused by his own stories, like they were flexible tools instead of facts. I finally mentioned it casually, not accusing, more teasing. I pointed out one of the contradictions, smiling like it was a joke. I expected him to laugh and correct himself. Instead, he paused. Just a beat too long. Then he admitted it. Not sheepishly, not embarrassed. He admitted it calmly, like he was explaining a personal habit. He told me he practices lying on dates. Not about big things, but small ones. He said it helped him learn about people. Helped him see what they tolerated, what they ignored, what they corrected. He said it like it was a social experiment. My chest tightened immediately. The diner lights felt harsher, the buzzing louder. I asked why he would do that, even though I already knew the answer wouldn't help. He said it gave him control. Said it showed him where boundaries were. Said if someone let the small lies slide, they would probably let bigger ones slide later. He wasn't bragging. That was the scariest part. He wasn't trying to shock me. He was explaining his system. I felt like I had stepped into a room I wasn't supposed to see, like he had pulled back a curtain he usually kept closed. Every moment from earlier replayed in my head with a new filter over it. The smooth adjustments, the confidence, the ease. None of it was accidental. I realized then that the date had never been about connection. It had been a test, and I had been passing parts of it without knowing. I asked him if anything he had told me was real. He shrugged slightly and said some of it was. He said that was the point. Truth mixed with fiction was harder to spot. He watched our reaction closely, eyes sharp, like he was still collecting data. My stomach turned. I felt exposed in a way that was hard to describe. Not physically unsafe, but mentally cornered, like I had been invited into a game I didn't agree to play. I told him I did like that. My voice sounded steady, but my hands were clenched in my lap. He nodded, like that response fit neatly into his expectations. He said some people react like that. Said others get defensive. Said he was still figuring out what kind of person I was. That sentence made something snap inside me. I realized he wasn't done. Even now, even after admitting it, he was still watching, still measuring. My discomfort was the signal to stop. It was just another data point. I slid out of the booth and stood up. My legs felt stiff, like they had forgotten how to work. He didn't try to stop me. He just looked up at me calmly, like he was curious how this would end. I left cash on the table without thinking and walked toward the door. The bell above it rang loudly as I pushed it open, the sound jarring and sudden. The night air outside felt cold and real, like I had been holding my breath inside without realizing it. I walked for a long time, not checking my phone, just letting the movement burn out the tension buzzing under my skin. Every memory from the date replayed itself differently now. Every smile, every story, every easy laugh felt staged in hindsight. He messaged me later that night, not apologizing, asking for feedback, asking if I had noticed the lies right away or only later, asking what tipped me off. Reading it made my stomach twist all over again. I didn't reply. I blocked him without hesitation. For days after, I found myself replaying conversations with other people, wondering how often I had let small inconsistencies slide, wondering how many times I had mistaken confidence for honesty. It was paranoia. It was awareness settling in slowly. What disturbed me most was that he lied. Lots of people lie. It was that he treated lying like a skill to refine, a boundary to test, a way to study people instead of connect with them. It made me realize how easily trust can be treated like a variable instead of something fragile. I kept thinking about the way he had explained it so calmly, like he expected me to understand. Like this was just how dating worked for him. Like the goal wasn't honesty, but leverage. I haven't gone back to that diner since. Not because of fear, but because I know exactly which booth it was. I know how it felt to sit there slowly realizing that the person across from me wasn't sharing themselves, but watching me decide how much dishonesty I would accept. Now, when someone tells me a story that doesn't quite line up, I pay attention. Not with suspicion, but with care. I notice whether they correct themselves or adjust smoothly. I notice whether they seem relieved by clarity or entertained by confusion. That night didn't end with shouting or drama. It ended with a quiet walk home and a heavy realization that some people aren't looking for connection at all. They're just testing how far they can bend reality before someone finally stands up and leaves. I knew something was wrong before she said anything, not because of a look or a pause, but because the night slowed down in a way that didn't feel natural. It was like the air thickened and the sounds around us dulled, like the world was quietly bracing for impact. I remember thinking I should leave early, but I couldn't explain why, and that's usually when I make the worst decisions. We met at a quiet park cafe that stayed open later than it should have. Lights strung through the trees, picnic tables scattered across gravel, bugs hovering around the lamps. It was casual in the way people pick when they want something serious to feel relaxed. She suggested it because she said she liked being outside. I showed up a little early and watched couples walk by, kids running past with ice cream, everything feeling normal enough to let my guard down. We had been talking for a few weeks. Nothing intense. No big future talk. Just enough to feel like meeting was worth it. She was warm in her messages, thoughtful, sometimes quiet in a way that felt reflective instead of distant. When she arrived, she hugged me tightly, longer than expected, like she needed grounding. I didn't think much of it at the time. We sat down with our drinks and talked about everyday stuff. Work, family, dumb stories that didn't matter. She laughed, but it felt like it took effort, like she was pushing through something heavy. Every now and then she touched her stomach absent-mindedly, not protectively, just like someone rubbing a sore muscle. I noticed it, but I didn't connect it to anything yet. As the night went on, she started asking questions that felt heavier than the setting. When I thought about responsibility, whether I saw myself settling down someday, how I handled pressure, I answered honestly, thinking she was just trying to understand me. I didn't mind. The questions felt personal, but not invasive. Then she got quiet. Not awkward quiet, deliberate quiet. She stared at the table for a long time, hands wrapped around her cup even though it wasn't cold. I asked if she was okay. She nodded without looking up, then took a deep breath that sounded like she had been holding it for hours. That's when she told me she was pregnant. The word landed hard, like it knocked the wind out of me. My brain stalled, replaying everything I knew about her timeline, about how long we had been talking, about what that could possibly mean. I sat there frozen, trying to process it without reacting wrong. She said she had found out recently, said she had been scared to tell anyone, said she didn't know how to bring it up without ruining things. I didn't know what to say. Everything I thought of felt inadequate or inappropriate, so I listened. Then she said the part that changed everything. She admitted she didn't know who the father was. She said it quietly, like a confession, eyes still down. She explained there had been a few dates around the same time. Nothing serious. Nothing planned. Just overlap. She said she had done the math over and over and couldn't narrow it down. My chest tightened. The sounds of the park crept back in around us. Laughter from another table. A dog barking in the distance. Life continuing like nothing had just shifted inside of my head. She finally looked up at me then. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from holding it back. She asked if I would be open to stepping up. Not asking if I thought it might be mine. Not asking for time or support. Stepping up. Like it was a role that needed filling. I felt dizzy. The question felt unreal, like it belonged in someone else's life, not mine. We had just met in person. We barely knew each other. And suddenly I was being asked to consider a future that wasn't even clearly connected to me. She talked fast after that, like she was afraid silence would make me leave. She said she wasn't asking for anything immediate. Said she just needed to know if I was the kind of person who could handle something like this. Said she did want to be alone. Every word felt heavier than the last. I tried to slow things down, told her I needed clarity. She nodded, said she understood, but kept framing it like an opportunity. Like stepping in could make something meaningful out of chaos. I realized then that she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at what I represented. Stability. Support. A solution. My face didn't matter. My feelings didn't matter. I was being evaluated as a possibility to fill a gap that had already formed. I asked if she had told anyone else. She said not yet. Said she wanted to start with me because I seemed kind. That word made my stomach turn. Kindness felt like a weakness being tested, not a trait being appreciated. I sat there trying to keep my breathing steady, trying not to panic. I thought about how easily this could spiral, how a simple date had turned into a crossroads I never asked to stand at. I thought about how fast my life could be pulled into something irreversible just by staying quiet too long. She reached for my hand. I pulled mine back gently, not angrily, just needing space. She looked hurt, but not surprised, like she had expected resistance and prepared herself for it. I told her I couldn't answer something like that. Not now. Not like this. My voice shook despite my effort to stay calm. She nodded slowly, tears finally slipping down her face. Not dramatic sobs, just silent crying that felt heavy and tired. People around us were starting to notice. Glances from nearby tables. Lowered voices. The intimacy of the park suddenly felt invasive. I hated that this was happening in public. Hated that I felt trapped by politeness. She apologized then. Said she knew it was unfair. Said she didn't mean to put pressure on me. But even as she said it, she kept watching my face, searching for a crack. A sigh I might reconsider. I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak, like they might give out. I told her I was sorry she was going through this, but I couldn't be part of it. I didn't blame her. I didn't accuse. I just stated it as clearly as I could. She didn't try to stop me. She just nodded, wiping her face, staring down at the table like the answer had finally settled. I walked away through the park, heart pounding, the night air cool against my skin. I didn't look back. I didn't trust myself to. My phone buzzed later that night. Messages from her. Long ones, explaining more, asking me to think about it. Saying she understood if I could, but hoping I might. I didn't reply. I didn't block her either. I just let the messages sit there unread, like something I couldn't carry with me. For days after, I couldn't stop replaying it. The timing, the way she asked. The way she framed it as stepping up instead of stepping in. It felt manipulative in a quiet way. Not malicious, but desperate and unfair. What disturbed me most was the pregnancy. It was how quickly she tried to assign responsibility without certainty. How she treated a stranger like a lifeline without considering the weight of what she was asking. I kept thinking about how easily someone can pull you into a life-altering situation just by trusting the wrong moment to ask. How dating isn't always about connection. Sometimes it's about survival. I never heard from her again after that week. Maybe she found answers. Maybe she found someone else willing to step in. I don't know. I don't really want to. That night didn't end with yelling or drama. It ended with a quiet walk home and a realization that sometimes the scariest part of dating isn't rejection or heartbreak. It's being asked to make a choice that was never yours to make. I thought unmatching him was the end of it, the digital version of closing a door and moving on with my night. I remember lying on my couch scrolling aimlessly, feeling that familiar mix of relief and mild disappointment you get when a date doesn't go anywhere, but also doesn't explode. Nothing dramatic had happened. That's what made the phone call later feel so unreal, like it belonged to someone else's life and somehow landed in mine by mistake. The date itself had been forgettable in a very specific way. We met at a casual place near the edge of downtown, one of those spots that tries to be everything at once. Coffee by day, drinks by night, loud enough to feel social but not loud enough to hide silence. He suggested it because he said it was easy. That word should have meant something, but I didn't think about it at the time. He showed up on time, dressed nicely but not memorably, polite without being charming, the kind of guy you could picture blending into a crowd without effort. Conversation stayed surface level. Work complaints, mild jokes, vague future plans that never really went anywhere. He laughed when he was supposed to, nodded when I talked, checked his phone just often enough to be noticeable but not rude. There were little things that felt off, but nothing I could point to clearly. He avoided specifics about his living situation, talked around questions instead of answering them directly. When I asked how long he had been single, he paused a second too long before giving an answer that felt rehearsed. Still, nothing screamed danger. It just felt like two people not quite clicking. We wrapped up without ceremony. No awkward hug, no promises. Just a polite goodbye that didn't leave room for a second thought. When I got home, I unmatched him without guilt. No message, no explanation, just gone. I went to bed thinking that was the end of it. The next morning started normal. Coffee, notifications, the usual routine. I was halfway through getting ready when my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, assuming it was spam. Something made me answer anyway. The voice on the other end said they were calling from the police. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like I missed a step. My brain started racing through worst-case scenarios before they even finished the sentence. They asked if I had gone on a date with a man whose name I recognized instantly. I said yes, confused and suddenly very alert. They told me my messages with him were now considered evidence. That word stuck to me immediately. Evidence, not information, not clarification. Evidence. They explained that he had been using dating apps to cheat. Not casually, not once or twice. Systematically. Multiple accounts. Multiple people. Overlapping timelines. Apparently someone in his life had finally found out, and when things blew up, the apps and messages became part of a bigger investigation into deception and fraud within his personal life. My chest felt tight. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my ear, trying to keep my breathing steady. They asked how long I had been talking to him, asked if I had met him in person, asked if I still had the messages. I told them the truth, that we talked briefly, that we went on one date, that I had matched him afterward, that I didn't think anything of it until now. They said that was okay, said even deleted messages could be recovered, said the timeline mattered more than the content, said my interaction helped establish a pattern. Everything about the call felt clinical, detached, like I was being slotted into a case file without context. I was in trouble, they assured me. I was just part of the story now, whether I wanted to be or not. After the call ended, I sat there staring at my phone, trying to process how fast my normal morning had turned into this. I replayed the day in my head, searching for signs I had missed. The vague answers, the phone checks, the way he kept things light without ever getting real. I felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with embarrassment. My private messages, my casual jokes, my polite replies were suddenly pieces of something bigger and darker. They weren't just words anymore. They were proof. Later that day, they called back to ask a few more questions. Again, calm and professional. They asked if he had mentioned traveling a lot, if he had avoided certain days, if he ever said he was busy without explanation. Each question peeled back another layer of the memory, turning neutral moments into red flags retroactively. I realized how easy it had been for him to blend in, how he never asked for anything suspicious, never pushed boundaries. He didn't need to. He just needed access. Just needed people to believe the version of him that showed up for an hour at a time. I asked how many others there were. They didn't give a number, but their pause answered it anyway. For the rest of the day, I felt like I was walking slightly out of sync with reality. Everything looked normal, but I could shake the feeling that my life had brushed up against something I didn't fully see. Every notification made my stomach tighten. Every unknown number felt heavier. That night, I read through our old messages again, the ones I had screenshotted out of instinct before unmatching. Nothing stood out, nothing dramatic, just small talk and plans that never happened. That somehow made it worse. There was no warning embedded in the text. No obvious lie, just a clean surface hiding mess underneath. A few days later, they contacted me one last time to confirm details. The situation had escalated. His partner had uncovered months of deception. Finances tangled. Promises broken. Apparently dating apps had been his escape and his cover, a place where he could build parallel versions of himself without consequences until now. I asked if he knew I had been contacted. They said probably not. Said they were careful about that. Said I didn't need to worry about being involved further. After that, silence. No more calls. No more questions. Just the echo of that word in my head. Evidence. Weeks passed and life settled back into routine, but something had shifted. I found myself thinking about how easily people can split their lives into compartments. How you can sit across from someone and only ever meet the version they curated for that hour. How unmatching someone doesn't always erase the connection the way you think it does. I never heard from him again. No message. No attempt to reconnect. I sometimes wonder if he even remembers me clearly, or if I blurred into the lineup of conversations he used to pad his time and hide his reality. What stayed with me wasn't fear. It was the unsettling realization that my normal, forgettable date had been a thread in someone else's unraveling, that my casual decision to swipe, chat, meet, and unmatch had turned into documentation of someone else's lies. I didn't do anything wrong. I know that. Still, it took a while to shake the feeling that my private life had been temporarily borrowed by something much bigger. Now, whenever I unmatch someone, I pause for a second longer than I used to. Not because I'm afraid, but because I know how little we really know about the people we let into our phones. How quickly a harmless interaction can resurface with weight you never expected. That night didn't end badly. The date was a disaster. The real disturbance came later, quietly, through a phone call that reminded me how thin the line is between forgetting someone and becoming part of their consequences.